and welcome to tonight's City Council meeting. The public can attend tonight's meeting in person at the George DeCiro City and County Buildings Council Chambers located at 1 Tacoma Drive, or watch live on Channel 8 and through live streaming on Broomfield's website, broomfield.org/live. The public may also participate in public comment either in person or by calling 855-695-3744 and pressing *3 to be placed in the queue for comment. Screeners will ask callers for their first and last name, neighborhood, and the agenda item the caller would like to comment on. If you'd like to speak on more than one item on tonight's agenda, you'll need to press *3 each time to be placed back in the queue for comment. Public comment will be limited to 90 minutes total per item. The first 1 through 15 participants in the queue have 3 minutes to speak. The next 16 through 25 have 2 minutes. And if time remains, the next 26 plus participants in the queue have 1.5 minutes to speak. For our hearing impaired residents present, we have wireless headsets available through the AV team in the back of the council chambers. The City Council regular meeting is called to order. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Anderson.
Here.
Cohen.
Here.
Delgadillo.
Here.
Henkel.
Here.
Jaworski.
Here.
Leslie.
Here.
Lim.
Here.
Marsh Holshan.
Here.
Schaff.
Here.
And Ward.
Here.
Thank you. A quorum is present. And will everyone please rise and join me for the Pledge of Allegiance?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. In an effort to keep order for tonight's meeting, I ask council members to limit their comments to 5 minutes. If council members are given an opportunity to speak for a second time, they should limit their comments to 2 minutes. And we'll plan on a 10-minute break at approximately 8 p.m. We'll begin with council's review and approval of this evening's agenda. Council may add or remove items from the consent agenda, or council may revise the order of business for the meeting. And we'll start with Councilmember Ward.
Oh, yes, I just wanted to move 7E on the consent agenda to business.
Thank you. So item 7E will be reviewed as the first item under council business. Does any member of council have any comments or questions regarding this evening's agenda? Are there any objections to this agenda being approved as modified? Seeing none, the agenda is approved. The first item under petitions and communications this evening is a proclamation declaring August 2023 as Broomfield Government Employees Appreciation Month. This is one of my favorite proclamations because we're so incredibly lucky to have the amazing staff we have in Broomfield. This evening, we have 2 tenured employees here to accept the proclamation on behalf of all the employees, and that is Sergeant LaFleur and Mr. McGinn. Will you please join Mayor Pro Tem Jaworski at the podium to receive the proclamation? Sergeant Scott LaFleur of the Broomfield Police Department School Resource Officer Unit will be celebrating 33 years of service next month. Gary McGinn is a technical communications specialist and will hit 33 years of service in January 2024. And we're so grateful to have you here this evening. Broomfield employees excel in the workplace and are dedicated to our community, as evident with service levels going above and beyond. And we're grateful to have so many with us this evening. Broomfield staff perform a variety of services to enhance and improve the quality of life for residents through recreation programs, environmental programs, art, music, theater, entertainment, cultural offerings, and more, while also preserving public safety, clean drinking water, and maintaining Broomfield's capital assets. Many of these things are done so well, they go unnoticed. Therefore, as mayor, I hereby declare and proclaim August 2023 as Broomfield Government Employees Appreciation Month. We are incredibly fortunate for you all and want to express our sincere gratitude for all that you do. Sergeant LaFleur and Mr. McGinn, would you like to make any remarks?
Mayor Pro Tem, and members of council, I'd just like to say thank you for the invitation to be here tonight and accept this on behalf of all of the employees, and just say how grateful I am to have been able to work here for the last 33 years and a few more. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mayor and council, I'd like to thank you for your recognition of our service to Broomfield residents and employees. It's been quite a change from when we became a city to a county. That was quite the challenge for us and enjoyed every minute of it. So thank you.
We appreciate you going through that for us because we are grateful every day that we're a city and a county. So thank you. We'll now proceed with public comments. If anyone else would like to speak on this item, please come up to the podium. And I don't see any online, so we'll move to council member comments or questions for our honorees. Yes, Councilmember Marshall Olson.
I just want to echo the thanks for everyone for what you do. I mean, as a resident of Broomfield, obviously long before I served on council, it was amazing each and every day to deal with, no issues dealing with the city staff and now on council, you guys are amazing. So thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Lim.
I just wanted to give a recent example and a shout out to the open space team. Councilmember Schaaf and I were at an open house on site on July the 29th, where we had a tremendous amount of residents who wanted to give feedback on the Markle and Watke open space plans. So the staff stayed over. They were there from 9 a.m. to 11 a.m. on Saturday, and I think they were there at least until 11:30. Way over necessary on a Saturday morning. And I just wanted to give that as a recent example of going above and beyond to get resident input. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Well, again, thank you again for your years of service and for all of your dedication to Broomfield and for joining us this evening to celebrate. Thank you to all of our employees. Next, we have an update from the Broomfield Police Department regarding public safety. Chief Hempelman, would you please come up to the podium and provide us an update?
Good evening, Mayor, Mayor Pro Tem and Council. I'm Anaya Hempelman, Chief of Police. I would like to acknowledge a few members of, did I lose you? On command staff here. Deputy Chief Mark Goodell, Deputy Chief Mike Clement is here. Commander Sean Laughlin from the detention center is here, as well as Commander Mike Svila. And then I have a special guest that I would like to have come up. I know I've talked a lot about our crime analyst, and I'm going to have Mr. Drew introduce himself here. He is our new crime analyst.
Awesome, thank you.
Hi there. I'm, like she said, I'm Drew Kimball. I'm the crime analyst for Broomfield PD. Just thank you for having me here tonight, and I'm sure the chief will fill you in.
Well, we appreciate you being here.
I wanted to have you put a face because he's the guy who provides me all the data on a lot of you when I'm reporting here tonight. So I wanted to have a face with a name. So Mr. Drew, thank you for being here. Next slide, please. So a few updates since my last presentation that I want to mention. Operation Brokeback is not in there. So we're going to start over. Can we cut and restart? We needed the humor, I guess. Operation Broken Valley. You know, I've rehearsed that 10 times and I never once said that. So it's an operation that we had multi-jurisdictional. It involved 28 jurisdictions. It involved a group that would commit burglaries, motor vehicle thefts, and they frequently scouted areas and then they stole cars. Once they took the cars, they would strip the cars and then they would use those vehicles to do additional crimes throughout surrounding areas. Ultimately, what happened with this is we were able to arrest 8 adults and we cleared up 13 of the Broomfield cases in those. So that was a great positive for us. During this operation, I can share that we recovered over 45 vehicles that were stolen, valued over approximately $1 million. This was a chop shop activity with over $96,000 recovered in stolen property, included firearms, tools, drugs, and fentanyl. And basically these 28 communities that came together did great work. So I wanted to talk about that because we approached this as a COCA case, which makes it a higher felony level, and it was a great success. The next one is Operation Cross Country. This was a nationwide campaign to locate and rescue victims of child trafficking. The goal was truly to reunite missing and endangered children with families and provide resources to assist with trauma of victimization and aid in recovery. So several of our detectives assisted the FBI field office. It was a regional approach. I also want to mention that we are very fortunate in Broomfield as we do not have any active missing children in Broomfield. Next one is Commons Park has been really a hot topic for, I would say, 3 years now since COVID. So I wanted to put that up here. And I included Northmore because what we saw is that although we've done a number of, and you've heard me use this word SEP, special enforcement plans, throughout the summer, we've done so many that Commander Spila here actually emailed me 4 pages worth of information. So I'm going to not have that much time. So basically what it turned out to be is several curfew tickets, traffic tickets, a lot of contacts and just good conversation with a lot of the kids, just educating them about the curfew and whatnot as well. So several hours, hundreds of hours of hard work, proactive policing. And the hope was really to deter crime. I know we've all heard about the crime that happens there at Commons Park, especially just the damage to the lawn and whatnot. But unfortunately, it did push some of the kids to go to Northmore. So now we have stepped up the same activity at the Northmore Park subdivision. And we also know that this time of the year, in the next few weeks, that'll calm down a little bit just naturally with the kids going back to school. But I wanted to add that on there, and I'll get back to that at a later slide. And lastly, wanted to end with some of the proactive success story. In Northmore neighborhood, we had a garage theft of high-end bicycles and tools that were stolen. Great patrol work, investigations work as well. We got some Ring doorbell footage, which is also always very helpful. Social media, and we identified the suspects and were able to get them into custody. This was thousands of dollars worth of tools, equipment, and we were able to return all that to the owners, which isn't usually the case. And lastly, our street racing. We just had our second regional operation where we assist, basically it's a multi-agency plan. And the goal truly is to monitor these larger street racing groups to track movement and really minimize the disruption that they cause with traffic. So just to give you some perspective, in June when we did this operation, we had 28 traffic stops, 22 citations, and 6 warnings. In July, we did another operation just a few weeks ago. We had 64 traffic stops, 59 citations, 5 warnings, a DUI arrest, a felony warrant, and drug arrest. And then we also had 3 vehicles that eluded police when we tried to make contact. And I want to share that as that does happen at times. We will be participating in one more regional prevention here in the next few months with our state patrol partners. Next slide, please. This next slide is, and I'll get more into this, but this is truly just a quick overview comparatively from 2020 to 2022. Originally, I had 2019 on this, but we're just going too far back. And I think we just need to get past that COVID date and just start moving forward. So if you look at this, this is truly 2020 to 2022. And then that green one is the 2023 quarter 1 and 2 year to date. So in most categories in 2020 and 20 are lower, and then they increase in 21, 22. But we are starting to see those trends lower a little bit in 2023. And I'll get more into the weeds on that in the next slide. Next slide, please. So this is the exact same data that you saw on the previous slide, but this truly breaks down that same information on the crime rate per 1,000 residents. So this is just charted differently. As I stated before, the way this is broken out is if you take 1,000 residents and you take how many crimes are happening per 1,000. So that's really just a different way to look at that. If you look at quarter 1 and quarter 2, I'll do a deeper dive on the next few slides, but I just want to put that as a whole, because I know some folks in the community have asked if we can display that differently. And I'm truly trying to capture just kind of what's been coming up in the last few months for us. Next slide, please. So this is our deeper dive. If you look at quarter 1 and quarter 2, what I've done is taken 2022 and then 2023 for just that same time frame. So in 2022, we had 1187 of property crimes. And property crimes are robbery, larceny, burglary, and motor vehicle theft. Comparatively, in January to June of 2023, we've had 1,099. So what we're seeing is for us in Broomfield, an 8% decrease in total property crimes. I graphed it both ways there. You see the graph on the right and the bar chart on the top left there. So the top left is the true numbers of how many we've actually had of those crimes. And the bottom right is that true crime rate per 1,000. So I want to just put that up there. So if you look at the bottom right chart, it shows the crime, for example, robbery. It shows an increase of 0.09 versus 0.12. But what I want to point out is the total number, because I think that's important. That increase has happened, but we still only have 9 robberies year to date. And that's why I try to paint a picture for both of those so you can see those. Next slide, please. I broke out the Broomfield motor vehicle thefts. As we know, the last few years, this has been a really hot topic. It's been really difficult even for the police department. I've broken it down so that you can see just month by month from 22 to 23. And the biggest thing on this is the total number difference. And we are down here in Broomfield, we're down 20% year to date from last year at the same time. If you look at both just the total number and the true numbers for motor vehicle theft are going to be last year, 213 versus this year, 165. So I wanted to put that up there so you had the true numbers. And then we also broke those down by the 1,000 population. Next slide, please. This is kind of a random slide, but I wanted to throw this in there because it has been asked recently about how we're doing in Broomfield with bank robberies. As a matter of fact, Drew, when I asked him to pull these stats for me, and he came back and he said, "Hey, Chief, we haven't had a robbery since 2021. And I thought, it can't be. I said, "I remember one around Christmas time." And he said, "It's 2021. I said, "Do another double, triple check for me." And he was spot on. So if you look at that trend in 2021, we did have 4. And if you look at the total for the other agencies, they were all at a higher level, but we have not had a bank robbery since that time. Next slide, please. Want to bring up a little bit about our detention center. So a couple just quick points that I want to share about the detention center. We have an integrated care model right now. It's incorporating a holistic approach to treat for immediate physical and mental health needs and addressing public safety concerns as well. It accomplishes through 3 screening tools: detention, medical, and Colorado pretrial assessment tool, which works really well for all of our stakeholders to include Medicare and Medicaid enrollment. We also utilize Unite Us, which is an electronic community resource referral system, which just started just yesterday. And it really allows staff to make referrals for transportation, housing, substance abuse, food, employment, any other medical or mental health needs that these folks need when they do come out of our jail system. Next thing was technology upgrades that we've had. You utilize the latest video surveillance to technology, basically to recreate a day in a facility. So we have video that's retained for 62 days. It's helpful in reducing litigation. And when we do have some kind of a claim, we have video to support what happened. And I think that's really, really important in this day and age. We also have live scan fingerprint technology. It'll biometrically attach a arrestee's fingerprint, handprint, signature, and photograph to their permanent criminal record, working to deploy. And then we have mobile fingerprint machines in the booking areas as well. And this links them directly to CVI within 5 minutes. And I wanted to throw this up here that I think is very important, the staffing at Broomfield Detention Center. So we have a very positive reputation here at Broomfield of employer of choice. And I say that with great passion for believing in this. The people who work in Broomfield want to be here, and that's wonderful for us. We really do focus, and you've heard so much about recruiting and retaining quality employees. The focus not only on employee salary and benefits, but health, wellness, positive culture, and just a good place to work. And so here in our detention center, on average, we average 90 to 95% of allocation. Most detention centers have 70, 75%. So we are doing really well. And most of the time, we're at 100%. So it's very rare that anyone leaves our detention center. And I believe Commander Laughlin, I'm speaking, I want to make sure I'm correct. We've never had someone leave our detention center to go work in another detention center. Is that correct? So that's phenomenal. And lastly, court hearing. House Bill 21-1280 requires all arrestees be brought before a magistrate or judge within 48 hours of arrest. We've been in compliance since inception of that new law, which it was April 1st of 2022, which is an incredible stat and difficult to hold. And we have never been out of compliance. Next slide, please. Couple interesting facts that we've been kind of what we've been up to the last couple months since my last presentation. And thank you. I saw a lot of your faces at National Night Out. Unfortunately, it only lasted an hour before Mother Nature took over. But we were able to at least move forward with that. The other program I spoke about previously that I mentioned would be coming, we just had our Live at 25 program. This is basically a program to teach young drivers to be aware of driving hazards, and collaborate. Really, we collaborated with our Broomfield Police Department and our municipal courts, and our traffic unit and school resource officers are the instructors. So it's via a court order. It's great. It's instead of a punitive measure, we basically can provide them training instead. And we know that young drivers involved in fatal crashes are more than twice the rate of all others. And I must mention that vehicle crashes are the #1 cause for death for people between 16 and 24 years old. So to have this kind of program here at Broomfield PD is something that I really want to boast about. We continue with our Inside Academy. As a matter of fact, tomorrow starts the last and final segment, and the graduation will be in September. And then I had to mention catalytic converters because it's always a hot topic, right? So last year at the same time frame, 2022, we did have 112 catalytic converter thefts. And this year we do have 92, which is still a lot as far as I'm concerned, right? Any amount is too many. And so I didn't get into a lot of those special enforcement plans, and Commander Svila is here and he would just, he will talk a lot more than I am about this because he's passionate about this, but we're going to try to do another etching program here in the fall. We've done the two. Our special enforcement team, our new set team that's being implemented on the 23rd, handed out 22 etching kits during National Night Out. So the program continues. And lastly, felony case filings. So just kind of to give you a number here, in Q1 and Q2 of this year, we have filed, our detectives have filed 347 cases. Out of those, 318 cases were accepted, which is almost a 91% acceptance rate. And I truly believe this is just due to the great work that our detectives are doing and a positive relationship with our district attorney's office. So I think that always has a positive outcome. Next slide, please. So I couldn't help but add this. Over the last few years, I know you all have heard as well about all the issues at Commons Park, and I spoke briefly about some of the plans that we've done proactively. I received this letter in the mail, and I love receiving this kind of mail because I don't always get the most positive letters. Sometimes there are people who are upset for a variety of reasons, and I'm going to read it out loud because I just love that this community member reached out, and it says, "Dear Chief Hempelman, I wanted to reach out to you again to thank you for addressing the issue at Broomfield Commons Park that I reached out to you about a few months ago. I'm sure you get complaints all the time, but I wanted to make sure I took the time to let you know we appreciate you and your department so very much. We appreciated the personal call from your division commander, the effort your department took to make the park safe again. I've heard from some of my neighbors that they have the quiet, I'm going to take my glasses off here, the quiet late at night. They also said they can bike, take their dogs for walks, let their kids play without the crime and the trash in that area. The racing and blowing through the intersection at Red Deer and Rabbit Mountain has been greatly reduced. Maybe a life or two has been saved with this. You never know. Once again, thank you for all you do and your department does, and I hope you all stay safe." So I just wanted to reach out and just share that because I think those sorts of letters mean a great deal to our officers. And it's nice to see that we have an effect on the community. And I want to leave you with one last positive story. It was in reference to, I mentioned briefly, the autism rescue kits that we handed out, and great success story. Received a letter in reference to an autistic 24-year-old male who had violent tendencies. He'd thrown his medication out the car window. His family called. He was in crisis, didn't know what to do. When we got there, we tried talking to him, but that didn't help. During discussion, he was provided with an autism rescue kit, and slowly our officers de-escalated the situation, calmed him down, and were able to speak to him. I mentioned these kits during this last presentation, and just as a reminder, those contain fidget spinners, squeeze balls, sunglasses, headphones, just lots of things that help de-escalate. And this actually calmed the gentleman down significantly. We eventually gave him a ride home. He wanted us to give him a ride home and not his mom. And we went inside with him and his family. He chose to take his medications. He thanked the officers. So just a very positive interaction. Unfortunately, when we do handle mental health calls, they could have a different outcome. So I wanted to share that story. Next slide, please. All right, I think that I know I talked really fast. So hopefully I answered a few of the questions of things that have come up over the last few months. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Chief Hempelman. We will have public comments on this item, so we'll proceed with public comments, starting with in person. If anyone would like to be heard on this topic, please come up to the podium.
Roxy Jula Luckmore. And in covering the comments, I'm very happy that I can now go over there and not to get attacked by a bunch of younger people than me, which I know I'm not that young. But my other problem is for the last 2 weeks, I know when school is about to take up again because the kids are either coming back from their camps or coming back from their vacations or whatever. Traffic with the younger people running the stop signs, running red lights is becoming extremely bad. And I do a lot of driving around the community. But I'm also finding that parents that have their children in their cars are starting to run a lot of stop signs and red lights too. So I would just like for this to be checked on just a little bit more. I don't see the officers too much at the main intersections, and Wadsworth Boulevard and Midway, I've seen some really close calls. So in the coming week or so with school starting up, I think that intersection, I know there's many in our town, but that intersection scares me more than a lot of them. There is another one. It's out on Sheridan and 136th. That scares me too. People blast through that one, don't even care what color the light is, whether they have a red light to turn. I've seen people near miss getting hit, sideswiped and stuff. So, and I got ran off the road. So I wasn't pleased about that, but my car is fine. And I'm fine too, except for I'm a little upset that nobody cares. Even when I talked, I see them later and I asked them, I said, so how'd you feel like running that red light? Oh, didn't hurt me none. That's a bad comment from a young person that isn't 18. And I have one other question. Do we have a law that states that kids that are under 18 can't have other juveniles with them traveling unless they're like going to work or their own, siblings? I'm seeing a lot of that.
Thank you. Would anyone else like to be heard on this item? We'll go to council member questions and comments next. Any member of council have any questions or comments for the chief? Councilmember Anderson?
Thank you. I do have a couple of questions and I would love to hear an answer to Ms. Jewell's question on the ages, because I know I have kids that are just starting to drive, and that there are, I can't quote the exact requirements, but there are limits on who they can have in their car. So that would be great to hear an answer to that. But I have had some questions related to fireworks, and I wish I would have sent these in sooner. So we could have had specific data. I don't know if you have that available, but if there's any data from the past month over how many like fireworks calls there were and how much enforcement we had, and if it's better than it was in the previous year. Or is that something that you need to pull together?
I do have that data. As a matter of fact, was it Commander Galis? I believe he's not here. He provided me that information. That's something I can definitely provide you.
Okay.
I don't have it off the top of my head, but I
That'd
can
be great.
provide-
And then the other question I have on the other one we hear a lot about is the street racing. I know you gave an update on the enforcement. Are you seeing, so I guess the overall question is, from your perspective of what you're seeing, are you seeing a decrease over a couple of years ago? Is it less prevalent, or is it still persisting? With
I don't know if I have the answer for if we are seeing it more or less. Commander Sela, do you have something that you could provide on that? He's on duty, the swing shift from 2 to 12 and could provide it a little bit more.
Sure. I think it's consistent. I think that I wouldn't say that there's either a uptick or a downtick in it. I do think that what happens is we ramp up enforcement, and all the participating agencies that are participating in these events do their enforcement efforts, and it displaces it. So they find a new place to go. So, and then because that enforcement dies down, let's say in our area, after they move, then they come back because we're not there anymore. So it's just this constant chasing, the dog chasing his tail kind of a situation. The culture is still alive from what I'm seeing on social media. The car culture and the various clubs that are kind of organizing these is still very much alive, but we're just constantly moving them around the metro area, which is why there's a regional approach to it with multiple jurisdictions, because it's just not something that just Broomfield can handle. It moves all over the metro area.
Appreciate that you continue to take care of that. Oh, and then if we can get the answer on the driving, the young drivers, their.
Yeah, so I don't have that off the top of my head, but does anyone in this room? Because none of us write tickets on the road anymore, but there are very specific laws of what age a young driver, if they're siblings or whatnot.
Yeah.
Commander Spila does.
I don't know if I have it off the top of my head. There is the graduated driver's license law. They can only have, you can have a sibling right away, but it is just has to be a direct family member. And then is it 6 months or a year? 6 months, they can start to have passengers. So they have to have their license for 6 months. You already have one? Perfect, yeah.
And thank you.
Yep.
Thank you so much.
All right, thank you. Councilmember Leslie.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Chief. Really appreciate the presentation. I was particularly pleased with the reference that you showed, the comparisons on the bank robbery side of it with the other municipalities. A couple of months ago, when we were dealing with some of the tax issues, we received an email from somebody who was making these broad claims that Broomfield has the most fentanyl deaths in the state of Texas. Broomfield has the most car thefts in the state of Texas. Broomfield has the most on and on and on and on. And I know that's not true, but it really would be beneficial if next time you come, you could show us where we do stand vis-a-vis the other municipalities in the state. I'd love to see us where we are statewide. Are we the worst in the state? Are we, in the top 20%, or are we in the bottom 20%? I think that data is really important because we get a lot of people who are quick to say, these kinds of gross inaccuracies that we're the worst and that we should be doing something other than what we're doing. And yet without that data, it's hard for us to counter those kinds of comments. That's why, again, I think that bank robbery data was very beneficial. So I would encourage you next time to please provide that kind of view. How do we stand vis-a-vis, and where are we needing to put more emphasis? Where are, like the street racing thing you just talked about, there's not a lot that we can do by ourselves. It has to be a regional approach. And so is homelessness, so is fentanyl, so is, what the things being done regionally would really help us to see that from a larger perspective. Where have we had, like you just said, success, but what is that success showing in terms of the total relationships? We've cut car theft by 20%. That's great. But where do we stand? So I hope I'm being clear.
Yes, you are. And Councilmember, actually, in the last presentation, I did provide that, and I actually kept that from the last presentation. And we actually are compared, and now I'm going off of memory here because this data shows Broomfield, and we probably don't have that. We probably don't have that handy, but I have it in front of me, and I can definitely email that to you all. And it's basically showing where we sit along with all the other jurisdictions, and it breaks it out by homicide, rape, robbery, assault, burglary, theft, motor vehicle theft, serious crimes, and then overall crimes per 1,000 residents. So I do have that information and be happy to reshare.
Well, that'd be great. And I'd love to see it, but I think it's more valuable for you to make a public presentation on that data so that the public sees it, not just
Sure.
members of city council.
Absolutely. I
Yeah.
can do that again. I did it on the last one publicly,
Okay.
so I will absolutely do that again.
All right, thank you. I very
Sure.
much appreciate that.
Thank you. Next is Councilmember Marsh Holston.
Thank you, Mayor. And actually, just a couple of questions, but I wanted to say thank you for everything you do. You do an amazing job. I actually had the same question as Councilmember Leslie about that regional data, because last time you did share with us, is that something that's updated quarterly, or is it something that's?
No, it's, I'm going off memory here, but I think it's yearly by CBI.
Okay.
Yep.
And then the only other question I had was, you mentioned the staffing rate at the detention center. What's our staffing rate overall in the department?
255 employees total.
Sorry, I guess I meant the vacancy rate, or
So in the operations side, we have attrition of 2, and really that's because of promotions. So last year, if you remember, in January of 2022, when I became the chief, we promoted 11 different positions, and it's taken us that long to backfill. We also asked for additional positions with our special enforcement team, which was 4. So that attrition for us is truly 2, but it takes us a long time to backfill all those positions. But we're doing really well as an organization.
Do you know how that compares to other regional departments?
Just from the standpoint, when I go to these regional meetings with the other, especially from the 17 judicial, we meet every single month. So 17 judicial district chiefs, and like Westminster, I know they were hurting with 35 down at one point. I think they're about 20 down right now. So when I talk to the other chiefs, that's constantly the conversation that we're having, is that shortage of officers. So we're doing pretty well. Ours truly are from the backfill of adding positions and then promotions or retirement for that matter.
Thank you. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Councilmember Henkel.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you for the presentation and being here tonight. And I love hearing these updates more and more because sometimes the word on the street can look very different and people can kind of skew numbers. I really appreciate the fact that we have the second lowest crime rate. That's what we discussed last time.
Yes.
And then, now that we have 20% less car theft, I have 2 questions. This one just deals with car theft. What have we seen has been the deterrent for that? What do we know?
Well, it's gone down a little bit across the entire state. I think in 2020, 21, with everything that happened and the systems of the court system and the jail systems, everything that was happening with the difficulty of trying to actually hold people accountable, I think we're finally catching up. We say, and I can't remember the number now, but a small percentage of people are committing a number of most of the crimes, right? So if we can have the system start working, I think that's what's happening. When I shared that one big operation where we had 8 of those adults in custody and 13 of Broomfield cases and a number of other jurisdictions. I think that's what's happening. Is I think those special plans that were coming together, not only regionally, but the work that's coming together by our detectives, it's kind of everything, right? I can't put my finger on one thing, but for Broomfield, I have to believe it's some of the proactive policing models that we're utilizing.
Mm-hmm. And then we also might see just sort of statewide, what it looks like, no matter what the price of the car is, it's considered a class 5 felony.
It's a felony. Yep.
Yeah. So I think that's very important as well for that word to get out. So I appreciate the work from our state legislature on that as well. And then my last question here, when you talk about the integrated care model, what does that look like in working with our courts navigator, or do we have our own navigator, or how does that work?
Yeah, I'm gonna have Commander Laughlin. He's passionate about our detention center. I'm gonna have him come up here.
Thank you.
That little old project.
Yeah,
Thanks for the question. That's a great question, Councilwoman. So the simple fact is we work really closely with our court navigator. We would prefer that it expand into county and district court. But Erin is phenomenal on the municipal side. So what we did is we integrated and onboarded her into our system rather than having 2 independent systems. So we refer clients, right, at that point, because they're released back and forth. So, and then next, our plan is to bring on probation into our model as well. So we have found that most other entities are not as far advanced as Broomfield is. So rather than us dragging them along, we're just going to put them into our system. So the Unite Us platform, that's a good example where we pay for those licenses for the court system. So that allows them to take our referrals we make from our facility. And when the individual is sentenced or deferred sentence into the municipal court system, they then get the same access to the same resources. So it's not that stop, start model like a lot of jurisdictions have. It's one continuous seamless trend because it's the same caseworkers. And to your second point, our navigators are our social workers that are assigned to the detention facility, right? So court navigator, that's a unique position because she also does probation clients. So because we're pre-adjudication and then sentence, we can't be in that same model because they're in our custody still. So we use a social worker platform for integrated care.
gotcha. And is there a good communication, do you feel, between that social worker and the navigator?
It's phenomenal. Yeah, they're
Okay.
all on the same platform. We have multi-systemic team meetings every 2 weeks where we pull together what we call our high use or high risk clients that are at risk of reoffending inside the facility institutionally and or criminally on the street. So we're all under one platform now.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Thank you.
all so much. And thank you for your service. I can't say that enough. I know that you all give so much and your families do too. So thank you.
We cannot do without your support.
Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Next is Councilmember Lim.
Yes, I just recently, in conjunction with Ms. Jules' comment, I just actually had another email from a Lackamore resident who was concerned also about running stop signs and speeding. Staff just replied to that in this past week. I recall, am I imagining things, that our communications department just put out a Facebook post about remembering it's time for school to start. Am I remembering that correctly, or did I see it somewhere else?
I'm assuming you're remembering correctly, but I'm going to double check because usually at this time of year, they do put those out.
So of course, Facebook doesn't reach everyone from our Broomfield posts, but that is one step we have taken to try to remind people that school is starting. We really do need to be more careful driving with children crossing the street and things like that. The catalytic converter kits. Well, budget time is coming up, I guess, when the departments have already gone through the budget process to a large degree, I understand, but we will be starting to look at them then. Do we have a higher demand for the catalytic converter kits than we have a supply? Can we, if it's a successful deterrent, can we meet the demand from the public?
So Commander's Field is actually the one that coordinates that with CBI, and it's something that we're going to keep doing. And CBI gives those to us along with the, what are they called? The clubs, yes. And I think we're doing okay on that. And as long as the community wants them, we're going to keep having the programs. It takes a lot of staffing to do the event because you have to have someone sketching and etching and doing everything with that. And then just to have the presence, and we try to do it here in the PD parking lot. So I think we're doing okay. And if we get to a point where that's a problem, that's definitely the conversations that I'll be having from a budgetary standpoint.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Can I add one last thing? So with school starting, we do the variable message board, we do the social media, but we also have, I know, our traffic teams, they actually are in charge of, each one of them is in charge of certain schools. And so we are very proactive once the school gets started we try to educate first. And then if we have to, we take the next step to issue citations.
All right, thank you, Chief. Any other comments or questions from council?
Mayor, if I can just interrupt real quick.
Sure.
Councilmember Lim, you are correct. It was on the police department Facebook page that they put that out.
Well done, being proactive. Councilmember Leslie, you had another comment?
Yes, thank you. Chief, now that you have this on the,
She found it.
yeah, would
This
you
is what I
mind?
shared. Yes,
Yeah,
absolutely.
Pointing out the.
Yes. So this is the one that I actually did the presentation on
Okay, thanks.
last time. And I'm going off of memory, which is never good. But if you look at Broomfield and all of our rates, I believe, and I'm going off of memory, actually, we were the second lowest, if I remember correctly, other than, I want to say it was Centennial. Yeah. So that is a great, comparison, if you will, amongst all the agencies. And this is something that I'll report out every time CBI provides it to us. I can't just try to compare myself to other agencies alone because of the numbers. But this is, I thought, was a good comparison that I shared at the first quarter. Thank you, council member.
Thank you. Anyone else have any questions? Don't see any. Well, you answered all of mine. And I definitely appreciate these updates, Chief. It definitely kind of separates the fact from the fiction, and we do appreciate you all
Thank
being
you.
here tonight to help get that out to the public. All right, we'll move to general public comment next. This is an opportunity for the public to comment on matters other than the items already listed elsewhere on the agenda. If there's anyone who'd like to be heard, please come to the podium, state your name and neighborhood for the record, and limit your comments to 3 minutes. I don't see any takers, and there's no one on the phone. So council's community and event updates are next. Before I turn it over to my colleagues, I'd like to take this opportunity to thank Jay Yamashita and the entire assessor team for their tireless efforts, especially over the past 3 months. Since the beginning of May, the staff of 9 dedicated employees has been busy meeting with residents and business owners to discuss their notices of valuation, along with researching and logging and responding to the 3,672 assessment appeals. I think that was a record for Broomfield that they received. The team has just completed the second level of appeals to the County Board of Equalization and are preparing for the next level. Thank you, Mr. Yamashita, and the whole team for all your long hours that you put in these past 3 months and for the work you continually do for Broomfield. So now to my colleagues, does any member of council have an update this evening? Councilmember Marshall.
Thank you, Mayor. Just wanted to remind everyone that tomorrow night is at 6 o'clock here in the council chambers is the Charter Review Committee's town hall that we're holding with residents. We have a facilitator that will be joining us to help engage the conversations with the public and the committee members. And so that is happening tomorrow night at 6 o'clock. And then Charter Review Committee meets twice a month on the first and third Mondays of every month. So
Thank you for that. Don't miss it. Next, we have Councilmember Shah.
Thank you, Mayor. So a few updates. The Rocky Mountain Metropolitan Community Noise Roundtable. We presented the noise sensitive maps and the VFR routes as possibilities. Those can be found on the RMMA CNR website. Those are very interesting. I would love to describe what those look like, but it's very difficult. So it'd be much easier. I'll send council an update of those, but if you're in the public, check those out online. Dues for 2024 were approved at $3,600 per member organization, which is the original amount established in the IGA. And then lastly, with the RMMA CNR, as I mentioned before, unleaded fuels is separate from CNR, but being a part of the airport community noise roundtable. This is a question I get often, and that work continues with the airport advisory group, and those discussions continue to happen there. They are looking to purchase tanks as well as tanker trucks and be able to offer unleaded fuel there at RMMA. The Rocky Flat Stewardship Council executive meeting happened yesterday. Full board meeting will happen on September 18th via Zoom. Again, we are going to be discussing the triennial review, which is every 3 years. The member organizations decide whether or not they're going to continue with the Stewardship Council. So that will be something that will be coming to council in the near future. The counties and commissioners acting together, CCAT retreat was this past week. It was great. We discussed a lot about organizational matters as well as previewed the November legislative, or this next year's legislative session. Of course, land use and housing is going to be a big topic once again. And lastly, wanted to alert everybody, the Jefferson Parkway Public Highway Authority Board meeting will be happening on August 17th at 3:30 at the Arvada City Hall. That's all I have. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Councilmember. Any other updates? All right. Well, moving on then. Council's consideration of the consent agenda is next. Earlier this evening, Councilmember Ward requested that item 7E be moved to council business. Therefore, it won't be reviewed at this time. The clerk will read agenda item 7A through 7D by title, and there'll be one opportunity for public comments and council questions and comments. Will the clerk please read agenda items 7A through 7D by title?
7A, approval of minutes from the regular meeting of July 25th, 2023. 7B, resolution number 2023-102, authorizing the assignment of the city and county of Broomfield's private activity bond allocation for 2023 to the Colorado Housing and Finance Authority. 7C, request for executive sessions regarding the city and county manager's annual performance review. 7D, resolution number 2023-109, opting in to the Proposition 123 program and authorizing the city and county manager to make and file an implementation commitment with the Colorado Division of Housing.
Thank you. We'll now proceed with public comments, starting in person. If there's anyone who'd like to be heard, please come to the podium, state your name and neighborhood for the record, and limit your comments to 3 minutes, please.
Mayor Castriota, council members, and city manager. My name is Chris Hammerschmidt. I'm with the Willow Run subdivision. Just a couple of things I didn't quite understand. With the private activity bond allocation, it said in the memo that Broomfield has no pending uses for its 2023 PAB allocation. You chose not to give it to the developers. And you chose not to give the money back to the citizens, which is probably a legal thing. So you chose to give it to another government agency. And I don't really understand that, especially since now you're accepting more money from Proposition 123 for the same types of things. And I was thinking about this, and it's like taking $20 from a man, giving it to all your friends, and then not giving him any money back, making him move into an affordable housing complex, or giving him only $5 back. This type of action only makes people less, it makes things less affordable for most people. So if you notice that cities and states with high taxation have homeless population, higher homeless populations, I'm worried that what we're doing is we're taking money from people because you don't know all the people that you take money from for taxes, from regulations, that type of thing. You don't know who you're pushing over the edge. So it's just for your consideration. And then Thomas Sowell, he's a great economist. He has a book called Basic Economics. And he said, when property rights are violated and economic decisions move out of the marketplace into zoning commissions, environmental agencies, and courtrooms, that is when low-income people lose leverage and are often treated as expendable. So I would appreciate if you would think about all the regulations you've passed, all the money you take from people and pass on for affordable housing, and is it really affordable? Just for your consideration, it's a different perspective, and I appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thank you. Would anyone else like to be heard on this, on the consent agenda items? I don't see any online. Does any member of council have comments on these items? Councilmember Shah.
Thank you, Mayor. So this is on agenda item 7D, the Proposition 123 agreement. So I think the city and county manager has mentioned this before, and I just wanted to make sure that it was in context with this conversation. So what are the risks for commitment to the Prop 123 program if we fail to produce the level of affordable units?
So I'm going to ask either Jeff Romine or Rachel King to come down and explain that. Basically, I think the risk is fairly low, the way the program is written right now.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem, City Council members. I'm Jeff Romine, Director of Economic Vitality. And the real quick answer is we have worked with and been talking with the implementing agencies of Proposition 123. They have identified both our requirements that we would need to meet, but they've also stated that if we were to miss those requirements over the 3-year period, that the only consequence that the city would face is not a drawback of any funds or an uncommitment of any funds, but just uneligibility for the next year. Now, they've also said that perhaps there may be some changes coming forth on further implementation changes, but at this point, of course, we don't know of any. So therefore, the assumption is if we were to miss the goal, which is right now roughly 300 units produced over the next 3 years, we would then be ineligible during the next year, the 4th year.
Okay. And so that was going to be my second question, was the 4th year. So thank you for that. Is there a chance that we commit and fulfill that 3-year obligation of those units, but the state does not have funds to commit to Broomfield, or do they commit those funds on the front end?
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem and council members. So the really what happens is again, this is competitive. Most of these programs are competitive. So it's much like, as an example, tax credits where they're applied for and CHAFA makes the awards. In this particular case, some of those programs are being done through CHAFA as a contractor for OEDIT, the Office of Economic Development and International Trade, or the Department of Housing is doing it for the Department of Local Affairs. Those are the two implementing agencies. The funding is coming first from any excess Tabor reserves or Tabor commitments. And then if that's not available, then it does come out of the state's general fund. So right now it's set up that there would be funds available for the years going forward. But they are competitive. They are not a per capita allocated set of funds like we see with the HUD dollars that you've approved in the past.
Okay, so we could commit to building those number of units, but see no funds from the state or from Prop 123.
Projects we would be likely Broomfield Housing Alliance may be supporting, we may be supporting them, or council may make a decision to support them. But it's likely Broomfield Housing Alliance that would be providing financial gap funding. But then those developments would then apply to those state programs. And that's how the awards would be. They'd not be being sent through the city and county of Broomfield. So it's not our funds, it's state dollars. We just have to commit so that our partners, whether they be nonprofit or public or for-profit, could be able to be in that pool to apply.
Okay, great. Thank you so much.
My
That's all I
pleasure.
have, Mayor.
All right, thank you. Councilmember Ward.
Thank you, Mayor. I have a couple questions on item 7B. So I don't know if Mr. Romine, you're the best person to answer those questions or not.
Go ahead.
Okay, I guess we'll give you a shot. The Colorado private equity bonds, can you just give a highlight of where does that money come from? First off.
Mayor Pro Tem, council members. So I'll give the first part of the answers, and then if we get really technical, Rachel is here to also answer the question. So private activity bonds, often for some of you who've been around or thought about government for a number of years, they were called industrial revenue bonds years and years ago. But PAB is allocated by the federal government. And so as an allocation, they then come to the state, and then they're allocated both by the state to the Department of Local Affairs, to CHAFA, and then they're also allocated out to individual jurisdictions. It's done on a per capita basis and a need basis. And so we do get an allocation each year. We can either utilize that for one of three purposes, and those purposes include affordable housing as well as business development through the former like industrial revenue bonds, so to support businesses. That portion of the program really hasn't been utilized probably for 15 years, most places because of cost of financing and other things. So almost all of it has been going into affordable housing. What is normally happening in Colorado is cities can issue the bonds directly. And that's something that some communities do, but generally speaking, most pledge those to projects that CHAFA has determined to fund with either 4 or 9% tax credits. And that's why we are suggesting that they be pushed over to CHAFA, because that enhances the likelihood of our three projects, as an example, that are in this round, possibly receiving an award from CHAFA, because now they have that secondary gap financing. If CHAFA makes those awards with a 4%, then likely these would be the tax credits or the PAB that would apply also with the tax credits. So it's part of the funding stack is what they're doing. I hope that I sometimes answer the question more than people want, but I think that gives you the sense of how it all fits together also. And so it is federal dollars, federal PAB, private activity bonds, capitalization that is being utilized from the Department of Treasury.
Okay. Yes, that did answer my question. You started bleeding into some other questions that I do have. But I just wanted to make sure that those are coming from the federal government's budget and not necessarily from the state or even the city and county's budget. My next question is more of a clarification from my end. Is we do list that there are three developments, Christian Church Homes, Ulysses Development Group, and Devco Development that have requested these bonds. Is it fair to say that should they get their financing approved that they need on their end, and we pledge these commitments to CHAFA, that they are fairly likely in receiving those private activity bonds?
Good evening, Mayor Pro Tem and members of council. Thank you for the question, Councilmember Ward. Yes, simply Chaffa is quite used to these types of requests from communities. As Mr. Romine suggested, a lot of communities around Colorado do allocate the PAB to Chaffa for them to administer. It's just an easier overhead because they already have that program set in place. So many of the communities do make that request. If they have projects that are successful in the LIHTC rounds with Chaffa, then those particular projects would receive that community's PAB allocation.
Okay, thank you. And if, for example, they do not, either one, two, or three of them do not become successful, it says in the staff memo that money would then be used for first-time home buyer programs in Broomfield, for example, or they could be put back into the pool for other municipalities or counties to use. How does that first-time home buyer kind of program work under this private activity bond? I keep wanting to call it private equity, and it's not.
So again, thank you for that question. To clarify, Chaffa runs its own various programs to support homeownership, rental programs, et cetera. So this would be a program that's run out of Chaffa and run statewide. And the residents of Broomfield who are applying for and participating in that Chaffa program would be essentially first up on the list to receive that assistance through this PAB bucket that belongs to Broomfield essentially. So it is not a Broomfield run program, but it would be solely run by Chaffa.
All right, thank you. Those are all my questions, Mayor.
Thank you. Councilmember Marshall.
Thank you, Mayor. My questions actually were asked by Councilmember Ward regarding the source of the funds. Just to verify that, to reiterate that they're not local money, they're coming from the federal government. And to the resident concern, I did want to just point out that while property taxes have gone up and we as council have enacted a program for rebates for senior citizens that are income aligned, Colorado still has the 5th lowest property taxes in the country, effective property tax rate. So I just wanted to make that clear, and that was all I had. So thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Any other council member questions or comments? All right. Seeing none, before asking for a motion, I want to remind everyone that item 7C is a request for executive session and requires 2/3 approval of council. Is there a motion by council that the recommendations contained in the staff reports for agenda items 7A through 7D be approved? Councilmember Shah.
So moved.
Thank you. Is there a second? Councilmember Ward beat you, sorry.
Second.
He was just a hair quicker. Thank you. Is there any discussion? All right, all those in favor? Any opposed? That passes unanimously. Thank you all so much for the updates. There is no business before the Board of Social Services this evening. And earlier this evening, it was requested that item 7E be moved to council business. As mentioned, we'll review this item now before continuing with items 11A and 11B. Item 7E is council's consideration of resolution number 2023-106, approving a repair and reimbursement agreement and granting the city and county manager the authority to engage a contractor to complete roof and other improvements at the former Safeway building. Council has a copy of the agenda memorandum, which I'll ask our staff to summarize.
So we're going to welcome back Jeff Romine to the podium. And we have one slide to kind of summarize the item because we want to get to council's discussion and questions. Jeff?
Mayor Pro Tem, council members, Deputy City Manager or City and County Manager Yeoman. We actually have two. This cover slide, as Don has pointed out to me, and now here's the one slide. So just to be literal as Don was, I had two slides. I'm sorry. Thank you, Don. Very briefly, as the memo pointed out, the property was acquired that we're talking about, which is the former Safeway just to the south of this building on the north side of 120th. We acquired the property in 2015. It was acquired as part of a grant of a large vision in the community to create a town center, a community center. And so that was part of the philosophy and somewhat pledged into that. As part of the development of that idea and that vision was to create a multi-tenant market hall. Repair of the roof was authorized by the city council in 2019 and funds were allocated. However, at that time, both the alliance, the developer and the city staff felt that we'd be moving forward in a relatively rapid manner on development. So we delayed on the roof repair at that time, just to bring that point forward. Obviously, as many of you know, the world began to change very rapidly in 2020 and most things then slowed down and development began to shut down for a period of time. So respective of the economy, respective of the characteristic, then things were delayed. As we're back on track again, we also have now an 8-year deferment on maintaining that building. And so that's where we are sitting today. So it was recommended after having both the developers, some of them, as well as some of their consultants and a consultant on our part look at it, that we did have some damage relative to mold, rust, and then there is some leaking in the roof, as we have indicated prior. So we have come forward with a idea that we need to make those repairs in an orderly manner to ensure that building's viability and get it in a place where it could be utilized for its intended purpose for redevelopment within roughly 3 years, according to the Broomfield Town Square Alliance's schedule. As indicated in a question from a council member, and our reply back was, it is our informed estimate that it'd be about $1.2 million for both the mitigation of the rust and mold on the inside, as well as the roof repairs. We wanted to make sure that we had enough money provided to make sure we hit all of those key life and health and safety issues related to that building. And so that it could sustain itself for another 3 to 5 years, just in case. Work repair includes those items, as I mentioned. We intend to move out quickly for solicitation. In talking to the co-director of community development, Katie Allen, her schedule is right now that we'd be able to let the contract roughly on October 1st. So we're moving rapidly forward with this if council feels this is the right direction. The last bullet point I'm just going to leave for Carl, because it's a question that both came from council and also just an identification from the memo on what the agreement's about. So Carl Front, who's Assistant City Attorney, will go through that. Carl.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Carl Front, Senior Attorney. So the agreement you're being asked to approve tonight, the reimbursement there from the developer would be 50% of the contracted cost of the work. And the trigger for that payment would be once the development proceeds to move forward and bonds have issued, the reimbursement would be the first dollars out from that bond issuance. And so that concludes the staff presentation and we will take questions.
Thank you, Mr. Front, and thank you, Mr. Romine. First, we'll go with the public comment portion. If anyone who would like to be heard, please step up to the podium and state your name and neighborhood for the record. And limit your comments to 3 minutes, please.
Rakshi Julel Luckmore. Okay, so I'm not going to call anybody a liar, but it was told to us that the repairs were made and we paid for it. So I'm not going to go back through and I'm not going to hunt this all down because this all of a sudden just has come to us. So now we're all in a lurch and now you're going to spend some more money. Although it was allocated, doesn't mean that we really actually have all the money there to be used. This is a waste of money on this building. It was requested by our city government management group that it be demolished. The developer come in and said, oh, no, we have to have that building so we can get loans on it and stuff because it's the only viable thing that we have that's there. Well, that means we have to fix it so they can get their loans and stuff on it. So that's how I heard the conversations. In my opinion, it needs to be demolished If this hasn't been done before, as it was said that it was supposed to have been done, then it's got to be 100 times worse than what it was before. So there is a point in time where mold cannot be repaired. You can fix all you want, but once the developer gets their money, their loans, then they won't be able to occupy it anyway. So it's going to end up probably being demolished. This is something for the future. So hopefully I'll be around to see whether that place is demolished or not. So because I think it should be. I don't think we should spend the money on it. They can build new. We haven't used it. It's been there to be used. Our kids could have had plenty of things to do in that building instead of going out and having to find things on their own. We could have had a perfect project right there. It would have had transportation back in the day too, because we used to have RTD that went right by there. So there's a lot of good reasons that it should have been taken care of before now. Now that it can't be really taken care of properly, it should be demolished. Pass it anyway.
Thank you. Anyone else like to comment on this item? Well, we'll go to council member questions. Wait a second. Oh, there's an inbound caller. They're in the process of being screened. They're not yet available. So we'll wait a moment. Okay, now they're screened. We will go to the caller on the phone. Rhonda, you have 3 minutes. Hello, Rhonda? Can you hear us? Hello?
Here?
Yes.
Hello?
Hi, Rhonda. You're live.
Hi.
Go for it.
All righty. Hi, everyone. Thank you for a chance to speak on this topic. And I just want to echo many of the things that the person before me said. I also want to express. I have been speaking.
You're cutting out a little, that's all. We can hear part of it.
Okay.
Keep going. Oh, maybe your
My
reception.
frustration with what's happened. We acquired the property 8 years ago, and it is not doing very well. It's deteriorating, and now we are on the hook for half of the cost of this.
I think you cut out.
I'm still trying to catch up with what I see on the screen with my closed captioning.
Yeah, there's a delay.
Okay. I don't know why that is. I'm on my landline, so that's pretty interesting. At any rate, it is problematic. It is costly. I think the council and government ought to consider that for future large chains who come to our town, one of the requirements, if they close their business, is that they are responsible for the cost of demolishing, or that they have to find another tenant and another use for the building. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Mm-hmm.
All right. I don't see anyone else. So we'll move on to council member questions. Please limit yourselves to questions during this portion, and the time to introduce amendments and state positions for or against this item is later. Are there any questions? Councilmember Cohen.
That was quick. Rather than going to the history, I just had a few quick fact checks I wanted to ask in terms of what is the age of this roof? Do we know?
The age of the building?
The whole roof that we're talking about replacing?
Councilmember Cohen, I don't recall specifically from when we did the due diligence on the purchase of the property back in 2014. I did work on that, but nothing has been done to the roof since that time. We were aware of hail damage to the roof as early as 2016. And again, we have not done any work on it since that. So
So rough estimate, it's 20 years old.
I would imagine. Yep.
Okay. So we're talking about a 20-year-old roof that obviously has been deteriorated by lack of maintenance. And if, remember what you said, there was plans to repair it when the leak occurred, but we had high expectations that there would be work done by the developer.
Yes, council member, at that point, city council approved for roughly $800,000 for that repair of the roof. And the decision was, as we were moving forward, that the development was imminent. So we wanted to, rather than spend money on repair, begin to move forward toward development.
Okay. So definitely deferred maintenance situation. So in terms of this repair, once it's done, how much of it will be lost when they actually do the redevelopment, or will this stay in place, do we think?
Rather than me speculate on what the percentage is, Tim Federgill from the Broomfield Town Square Alliance is here. Perhaps he would have a better sense of what that percentage would be. Tim?
Mayor, council, thanks for having us this evening. Tim Frederico with the Broomfield Town Square Alliance. I have a cheat sheet, Carl. I have got the report. I pulled up the inspection report. 2004 was the approximate age of installation of the roof. As far as how much of the roof are we going to salvage, rough estimate 70% of the structure that will remain, including this new roof. So
only 30% of what we're paying for now will get taken out hopefully shortly, once again, in a year or two.
that's right, rough estimate. Yeah.
So it's well beyond its lifespan anyway.
Right at that 20-year age where you expect something to be replaced, but we had that large hailstorm, was that 2016, 2017? Took out Colorado Mills, if anybody remembers that.
Yeah.
That's what turned that thing into a sieve, and it's been sitting there since.
All right. Thank you.
Welcome.
That's all.
Thank you. Councilmember Henkel.
Thank you. Sorry, I thought Councilmember Ward was ahead of me. Huh.
I was kind of going back
Take
and forth.
that. Just kidding. I'm joking. Thank you. I do want to address what one of our public members said. I believe that there still is an RTD pathway running through on 120th. So I do want to make sure that people know that. I have friends that live on that street that use RTD to go to school in Denver. Secondly, what does the reimbursement agreement look like? And are the developers signing off on the cost? I just don't want to go forward with this and then have the developer say, oh, well, we weren't part of that contract. That's too much money for us. What does it look like for us to partner with the developer on this contracted costs on the front end?
Thank you, Councilmember Henkel. So under the reimbursement agreement, the developer would be responsible for 50% of the costs should their development move forward. Staff has been in close communication with the development team about what those expected costs for the repairs are. The developer had some estimates done on their own that we used as part of city staff's due diligence to come up with that $2.2 million number. So while the reimbursement agreement doesn't specifically address with them a specific amount, the parties have been in communication with what that amount is anticipated to be.
Okay, I would like to see some sort of agreement on, 50% of the contracted cost and having that in writing and making sure that we aren't just, having them back out because they couldn't get, the funding for it. Because we've been moving forward with good faith and knowing and feeling that they're going to have the funding. So thank you.
All right, thank you. Councilmember Ward.
Thank you, Mayor. My first question is going to be, so back in 2019, council had allocated, I think you said roughly $800,000 for roof repair. What happened with that allocation? Have we kept it in, I guess, what I'll call reserve, or have we just reallocated those funds since they were not actually spent?
I'm going to ask our Chief Financial Officer, Brenda Ritchie, to come down.
Good evening, Mayor Pro Tem Brenda Ritchie, Chief Financial Officer. Thank you for the question, Councilmember Ward. So in 2019, when those funds were allocated, they were held for a period of time. There was some work done later on in terms of some mitigation and remediation that was actually done in-house and in conjunction with a contractor. So then after those funds had been used and they were then rolled back into the fund balance of the the CIP capital fund that it came from and for use for later reallocation.
All right, thank you. My next question, again, going back to 2019, is when we decided as the city and county of Broomfield to not do any remediation to the roof because there was anticipation that Town Square was going to, I guess, take over responsibility. What was that agreement going to look like? Were we still responsible for some portions of the cost of that roof or were we going to be reimbursed like we are now? Or were they fully responsible for remediation and repair of that roof at that time?
Mayor Pro Tem, council members. So the agreement that really is the overarching agreement related to costs in the full development is the redevelopment agreement of 2019 that was passed relatively in the same year, obviously, a few months later. And so what that really calls for is upon them beginning the project, we turn over the property, at which point then they would be fully responsible for that building. And it is their intent to then redevelop that building. So the feeling was, since the project was about to move forward as a whole, all 20 acres plus that building, that's how it would be turned over, and that would be the maintenance going forward. So that still holds, that once we turn over the property, once they move forward, and we turn over the property, they will own the building outright, and they will be fully responsible for both the redevelopment and the long-term maintenance of it as part of their development. So that.
Yes, that answers my question. Thank you, Mr. Romine. My next question is going to be about this 50% reimbursement. I have concerns that, or I shouldn't say concerns, I take issue with us only being reimbursed 50% for the cost of remediation when this project has taken, in my opinion, far too long. Granted, there were some intervening factors such as COVID, but still this project has taken much too long. And given that we were anticipating them taking it over in late 2019, maybe early 2020, I don't feel it is necessarily our responsibility to front the full cost if it was anticipated that the condition was they have to repair the roof in whatever capacity that was. And so I guess my question is, why is it only 50% and not necessarily 100% reimbursement for this?
I think I can take that, Councilmember Ward. So city staff had been in discussions for about 2 years with the development team about various mechanisms to deal with the Safeway building. We looked at possibly doing a lease of the building to them so that they could take on these repairs. We looked at turning the property over to them at an earlier date, date that was identified as a date certain. Unfortunately, none of those conversations came to fruition for various reasons. One of them being liability on the property, and another being the unknown timing of when the project might move forward. Knowing that we had to come forward with repairs to the building before we enter into the winter of 2023, 2024, that's how we got to where we're at tonight. We negotiated hard with the developer. The best we could come to agreement on is this 50% reimbursement.
All right, thank you. Can you maybe go a little more into what that liability issue is, just so we as council and the community have an understanding of what does that liability mean? Not everyone jump at once to answer the question.
Sure. Okay, thanks. Yeah. Not an attorney, but I did stay at Holiday Inn Express last night. I think what we have heard as far as what the concerns are you have a roof that is leaking, so structural deterioration of the building, additional environmental deterioration of the building. Could that result in a safety hazard or an environmental or health hazard? We've been undertaking inspections, both environmental and structural. We believe the building's worth saving. But the collective decision, beginning with the city and upon reflection by the development team, is to preserve this asset. The city owns a very large building. It's been without a proper roof for years now. It's all of our intention to start this project as soon as we can. You got a whole team pushing as hard as possible to get this thing out of the ground. But the game shouldn't be played anymore of, we hope this is going in the ground this fall or next spring. That's how we got where we are. We got to fix this. Money was allocated, it wasn't spent. Fix the problem, stop any further deterioration of the asset, preserve the asset, because whether the project goes or not, city owns a 60,000 square foot building. That's an asset that should be preserved. It's the fiduciary responsibility to preserve assets like that. And we believe the asset's worth preserving. So the collective decision was, hey, before we go through another winter season, put a roof on this building, come up with a fair agreement. 50-50 felt fair in a partnership like fashion. And that's, I guess, the past 6 months.
All right, thank you. Ms. Ritchie.
Thank you, Councilmember Ward, Brenda Ritchie. Just to also add from a city and county perspective, from an insurance standpoint, we have to insure the building. And without knowing that there is damage or that there is possible penetration of rain, should we have anything, it becomes uninsurable from a standpoint for coverage. So we want to do our best in terms of mitigating that risk and ensuring that should something happen, that while it's a vacant building, there are risks that exist. So from a city and county perspective, by ensuring that we address the issues that have been identified, that we will maintain that coverage from an insurance perspective.
All right, thank you for that additional information, Ms. Ritchie. My last question for this item will be, when exactly is the Broomfield Town Square Alliance anticipating taking over responsibility for this project? Because we've already approved an SDP, and in 2019, there was nothing approved, but we were anticipating it. And so I'm trying to figure out, what is the threshold that the two entities have to cross before Town Square Alliance actually takes responsibility for this item and is committed, in my opinion, truly committed to this project.
So before I ask Tim to answer the question, because it's really, I think, aimed at Tim, I do want to make one correction, and that is the PUD has been approved by City Council.
Thank you.
The
Sorry.
SDP we're hoping to prepare and have that ready for council's consideration this fall. And we're working with the developer on that portion of it. So just that minor correction, but a critical, important correction. Tim?
Yes, thank you for that. Vacation brain a little bit. We have too many acronyms, so I'm
And
sorry.
I thought
PUD, not SDP.
I thought we could
PUD.
tack that onto this hearing and just let's the SDP done with as well. But that's where we're at, is processing the site development plan. You approved the zoning August of last year. Since then, we've been processing our site plan. We're now in submittal 7 of that site plan. It's in for processing with the city. That is targeted to go in front of you all September 12th. And then thereafter, we hit go on construction documents with the targeted construction start Q1, Q2, 2025. So provided all goes well in September, site plan approval, hit go on construction documents, about 12 months of construction documents, 6 months of permitting thereafter.
All right, so that still doesn't answer my question of when are you taking possession of the property and the deed is transferred over?
That would be the transfer of the property date, is the commencement of construction. So when the property is transferred and work begins on the asset.
All right, thank you for that clarification. And I did have one last question that came to mind. What is a rough estimate of demolition costs? Just gonna throw that out there.
We put some rough numbers to that at one point. All in, I think it was a 300 somewhere-ish in that ballpark. Does that sound right?
Mayor Pro Tem, council members, I think when we had talked about it internally, we estimated to be somewhere between $500,000 and $1 million for the demolition. It may be, to Tim's point, Tim's an engineer and does construction. I'm an economist, as you all know. So therefore, if he's saying it's roughly 300,000 to 400,000, but we thought it would be a little bit higher is what the staff estimate had been. If we were to demolish the building. Obviously, one of the key things, as many of you know, is there are two wing buildings related to this particular one that we own. The wing building on the left is actually attached. And so that would be the complication within the whole demolition of that building if we were to proceed in that direction.
All right, thank you. Those are all my questions, Mayor.
All right, thank you. Councilmember Marsh Holston.
Thank you, Mayor. Once again, Councilmember Ward took a couple of my questions. So I guess the biggest question is, what if we say no? What happens to the building? What's the consequences of that?
That you could, Mayor Pro Tem, council members, Councilmember, sorry, but it's just habit, as you all know, and it's just something I learned years ago, so I still do it. But in all seriousness, and getting to the point of the question, one option would be for us to pursue a conversation with the developer again about the demolition. They have indicated previously that they feel the building has value for the development and would keep the development moving on time. So that's their voice that I've heard them say many times as we've discussed this. From our perspective, one thing we could do is take the roof off, leave it open. We're not exactly sure how long the viability of that site is and what that might impact the tenants in the other buildings that are associated with the site. The third option is to just let it go. As we know, we just went through one of the strongest, wettest winters we've seen in a long time. We can all pray to our individual deity or spiritual and hope that it's a dry winter. But our feeling is from a staff perspective, and this is collective, including Public Works and others, and there are some members from Public Works, that is probably not in our best interest to ignore the problem. So I think those are your three options that we'd have to explore if council were to not approve this tonight. I would defer to deputy city and county managers to see if they wanted to add anything to those comments.
No, I think Jeff covered it well.
Okay, on that point, Ms. Ritchie, you mentioned that it becomes uninsurable at some point. What happens if the insurance company pulls? What's the implications of that?
That's a great point of clarification, Councilmember Marshall-Holston. In terms of if we do not mitigate this, we will lose the insurance coverage. And so we would be liable for anything that would occur on that property, which it would cause a potential financial greater risk that could cost potentially more than addressing it at this cost for repairing the roof at the current state.
Okay. On the timing, you said that about 1.5 years before you take possession of the building. Is that what? Okay. And so the question I had, the follow-up to that is, if we mitigate the roof and the mold, is that building usable for other purposes in that 1.5 year time frame? We still own this building. We've heard that we need police extra facilities because, we're busting at the seams for the police building. Could we use this building for something else in the interim?
I will start it. Perhaps my friend Ken is coming up to talk a little bit more about it. I have walked through that building several times now. There are deep holes in the building where the piping for the coolers and everything else were in. So there's actually a significant amount of concrete that would have to be adjusted and things like that. Things could be done, obviously, and money could be spent for a temporary use. In addition, we have turned off most of the systems and stripped out some of the systems because it made sense to prevent any other possible outcomes occurring. The structural damage is really just rust. It is not something like the building is about to implode from the steel coming. So it's really mold and some rust, but making sure that we're dealing with those so it doesn't further deteriorate. As far as adaptive reuse for a temporary use, I'm going to defer to Ken for that.
Mayor Pro Tem, council members, Ken Rudd, Director of Public Works. The facility has really been stripped of electricity and the HVAC systems to prevent any possible liability issues with any electrical fires or any of those type of things. So it would take a significant effort to reinstall the electricity and the HVAC.
So significant cost, I'm guessing.
Yes.
So even if we wanted to like rent it to one of the Halloween stores, we couldn't do that. Yeah. All right. Go ahead, Mayor. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Next is Councilmember Lim.
Yes, first, the resident question. Is there any indication from our preliminary estimates that any consultant has said that the mold that's there is no longer able to be mitigated? Do we have any indication of that?
No, we've just had one consultant look at it over the past 6 months or so. More of the mildew type mold spores. The building was mitigated for mold by the city. I don't know if that was 5 years ago. So most of the organic materials were removed from the building already. So really what we're talking about is surface mildew on concrete and steel.
Okay.
The scope was relatively mild. It was under $100,000.
Okay, that's helpful. Thank you. Another caller, excuse me, another caller indicated that they see this at least as a lesson for how to make a future developer more responsible in these transactions. Could you address that? And then perhaps to address the question, is this because of our partnership in this? Is this a completely unique situation where we wouldn't have necessarily encountered this kind of transfer and situation before?
Members of council, Mayor Pro Tem, I think that one of the things that City and County Manager Hoffman has repeatedly said when we talked about, as an example, the agreements that we have with Mace Ridge for the redevelopment and reinvestment in Flatirons Crossing is in every particular case, we have learned from some of the previous work we've done. And so therefore, in everything we're doing, we recognize that perhaps the timelines here weren't as firm and as strict. There was some reasons for that because of the vision that was being anticipated and the grandness of the development as is being proposed back when it was originally proposed in 16, 17, 18. So we are no longer, we would not repeat this to be very specific. And that's something that Manager Hoffman has made very clear to staff to make sure that we do not run into some of these things again. Looking back and second guessing some of those agreements is not necessarily what we're trying to do. We're trying to figure out ways to go forward and to do better every time and to put the city in a better situation on any development that we're a partner in. I think that fairly represents.
Yes, thank you.
I'm looking over to my colleagues who are both shaking their head yes. So I think I got 2 thumbs up this time.
Is there, council is being asked to grant the city manager leverage or a variance to the amount, since the 1.2 million is only an estimate. There's no threshold at all within what we're approving for as a cap for what that amount might end up being. Would there be a point in time at which either the city manager or can we envision a point in time in which the developer, since they're on the hook for 50% eventually, would say the estimate was way undervalued and we need to go back to council with this before we approve X 1.2 plus X?
It's a good question, Councilmember Lippman. I think Carl's got the answer for that.
Thank you, Councilmember Lim. So the authority to grant to the city manager under the proposed resolution would be to not exceed 1.2 million. And so if the bids come back higher than that, we would be coming back to council for additional authority due to the due diligence that city staff did in coming up with that estimate. We don't believe that will be the case.
Okay, that's good to know. Do we have any indication that the developer is sincerely moving forward as fast as possible with the takeover of this building? Do we have any indication from staff's perspective that the financials will move forward quickly?
Members of council, so on the first part of the question, do we have any indication? We meet with the development team generally about once a week now on various topics. One of those is, of course, the agreements that we need to do, the operation and maintenance agreement, as well as the other agreements are related to the SDP. The intent is to move forward. We are striving to hit the September 12th deadline. It does require the developer to provide some comments back on our comments within roughly a week now, a little less than a week, for us to be able to start turning it into memos. So that's the best I can tell you is right now it is falling on them to reply to some of them and for us to come to something that we can present to city council. As far as the financing, which is the second part of your question, obviously, as you can imagine, as we've heard on many other developments, the interest rate and the availability of equity investments has changed considerably over the last year. However, as Mr. Federgel and his partners in the Broomfield Town Square Alliance have indicated, they do believe that they'll be going toward bond issuance and bond offerings in early 2025. I just want to make sure I got my year right, but in early 2025. Obviously, their ability to get capital to move the project forward is the big hurdle, but that's what they're going. As you may or as we have indicated, there is an underlying urban renewal area that is part of this and urban renewal, and they have come and met and presented with the Boulder Valley School District, and they have indicated their interest in supporting this project if it were to move forward. So things are lining up on the finance side, but I am not, as many economists have taught me over the years, it is sometimes a little bit crazy to guesstimate what the interest rates might be in a year, let alone a year and a half. So I am not going to speculate on give you 100% certainty. I'm just telling you those are the variables that are lying at rate on related to the finance.
Okay, thank you. Those are my questions.
All right, thank you. Councilmember Anderson?
Thank you. I think I'm down to one question here. So okay, as we're having this discussion, to me, this feels like a $1.2 million gamble on our part. It doesn't feel like we have certainty. So I guess the question that I would want to know is, I lost my question here in this, the value of the building. What is I guess there's two people that are seeing value in this building. One is, what is the value of the building to the developer? And then what is the value of the building to us? I would love to hear both of those numbers. Like, do we even see any value in this building? And yeah, go ahead.
I'll shoot first.
Yeah.
When we look at the value of the building from a developer's perspective, we're looking at the physical sticks and bricks. So really trying to quantify what is the steel worth, concrete, you've got concrete footings down there, you've got a concrete slab. As we noted earlier, some of the building goes away. If you recall, we are cutting the building in half for the north-south connection, but vast majority of it's going to be saved. As Dana said, Dana Crawford, our partner, as you know, it'd be on American to, just throw away that resource. Rough estimates, it depends on whether you want to value it and like new, like if you wanted to if I dreamed up 60,000 square feet of retail made of steel, steel framing, it might be worth up to $6 million in its current condition. It might be $2 million, but there's real value in literally sticks and bricks out there. The pro forma for something like a market hall, as we have learned from experience, they don't always make a lot of sense. This is not something that probably pencils without financial support. And financial support is coming in the value of that building that's being contributed to the development team. Without that, the easy button here is to let's knock this thing down, start clean. That's way easier from a developer's perspective. You get to create exactly what you want. It's also much more expensive. The pro forma likely cannot support that. So the strong push to save this building is we don't, what's left and what you're going to be left developing is likely of a smaller scale. That might not be a big deal to a lot of folks, like, hey, do we really need a 50,000 square feet of building left over? Are we good with 30,000 square feet of building? If we were to rebuild this thing, maybe that feels appropriate. What people miss there is you just took out 20,000 square feet of taxable revenue, both from a sales tax and property tax perspective. Those tax revenues support the bonds. Those bonds support the public infrastructure. It's all related. So preserving the asset, we believe, is in the best interest of pushing this project towards the start and proving it's economically viable.
Okay, so a follow-up question to that, and I'll talk, and then Mr. Ryan can go, but okay, so this is the concern. We put $1.2 million into this building and another issue comes up between now and 2025, or the date slips or something happens. So I think there's that. I mean, I think that's where we're looking at our staff going, where's that agreement that this is going to go forward? And it hasn't been successful, like a verbal agreement or anything like that. That's the hang up here, is that if I knew for a fact that this was going to happen in 2025,
right,
it'd be easy at this.
Noted.
Not
I
easy,
think
but yeah.
one thing you can't hang your hat on is you own the building. So you're not roofing our building, you're roofing your building today. And what you're left with at the end of the day is a building with a nice new roof. So whether this project moves forward or not, in the interest of preserving the value of your assets, probably in your best interest.
And then I'd love to hear from Mr. Romine too, from the
sorry.
city's perspective. Thank you.
And I'll speak first, but I'm going to defer possibly to my colleagues. And that is I think from this perspective is I've been here now 4 years and we've been working on the Broomfield Town Square vision. The real value of the building is the ability to move that development forward. That's really what it's about. If it wasn't that development, it would be hopefully something else that would bring activity to that site. Whether another developer potentially would look at that and want the building or want a clear site, I can't speculate, but that's what it is. As Ken has indicated, it doesn't really have much use for us as a community for a different community facility because the expense would be pretty prohibitive for us to re-adapt that into something else. So really it is to drive to a future development, whether it be with the existing one that's been proposed and talked about within the community for 8 years or so, or to find somebody to replace it in a future year. And I just don't know what a developer might do. I don't want to speculate on that. So that's the best I can tell you is it's the path. And I'll look to Abby or Don to add to my comments.
I think Jeff said it well. I mean, that's where we are right now. And so speculating forwards is difficult. So I don't want to repeat what he just said. I think Jeff said it well.
Okay, and I guess I have one final question. So from your perspective, there would be some value in it. And we're assuming this is all going forward in 2025, and this is going to feel a whole lot better then. But if with this building repair, do we feel confident that there will be nothing, say we had to go 2, 3, 4 years, that we're good, that we're not going to see any more expenses, or are we not feeling so confident?
Our intent, so Mayor Pro Tem, council members, our intent with this is to make that final push to get the building in a place where we can sustain it until the developer is willing to take it on and begin that redevelopment. So we do not see this as we've got a repair now and we're going to have another repair in 2 years. It is our understanding as staff that this is the repair that needs to be done to get us to that final point. And so that's that. Now, there was a question, and I'm just going to reference it, obviously related to the exterior of the building. That is not part of this. And that is more of a cosmetic side. This is the real concern is related to the risk and the safety issues. And we wanted to make sure that we presented something to council. This is where Manager Hoffman was, is be very clear. Let's figure out what we have to do and let's do that and see if that makes sense. So we're following the direction that council has set as you discuss the PUD and to make this project move forward.
Okay, thank you. And then we can talk about that wrap later and the idea of something on the side. That'd be great. Okay, thank you.
All right, thank you, Councilmember Schaaf.
Thank you, Mayor. I'll reserve my comments on the why of this building agreement, but I wanted to address my questions of the how of this building repair agreement. So I have my assumptions and I'll hold my assumptions and just ask the question. What is the rationale for providing the contracting authority to the city and county manager instead of a contract coming back to a council, which is standard procedure?
I can address that, Councilmember Schaaf. It really is about timing of being able to get out to bid and to get the contract awarded and the improvements done before the winter season starts. It really boils down to that.
Great, thank you. That confirms my assumption. The second question I have is how will the selection of contractors for the roof repair and the mold mitigation be chosen?
Question, Councilmember Schaaf. So it'll follow our standard bid procedure. So it'll go out for solicitation and then it will be based on best value of the contract to be able to meet the scope of work that's needed for the building.
Okay, great. And then my last question, which maybe Ms. Ritchie can answer. Will these contracts be made public at a future council meeting date as they do exceed that threshold that we normally would have set for the city and county manager?
So if it would become above the not to exceed amount that would come before council, yes, you would see those contracts available that we would be proposing to execute.
But we wouldn't see those contracts if it was below that 1.2 million.
That's correct.
But those would still be a public document and they could still be.
That is correct. It would be a public document and available for viewing.
Perfect. That answers my questions. All right, that's all the questions I have, Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other council member questions? Well, the big question for me, because I was on council in 2019 when there was a strong push to save the roof then, and council acted and approved the funds to do it, which you're saying was 800,000. Former Deputy Manager Stambridge in January of 2019 said the roof material was damaged and has since deteriorated and will cost, we believe, 400 to 500 plus some other costs. So my question is, who made the decision not to move forward with the repairs in 2019? Because it was urgent then. It didn't come back to council. We approved the funds. We approved the project. Several of us were on council.
So I was not up in the city manager's office in 2019, so I'm not sure I can speak to that. Jeff, do you know, or Carl?
It's very.
I was not, I was in with the city.
Go ahead. I was president. Honestly, it's a bit foggy.
Not to me.
Yeah, no, I don't recall there ever being a concrete decision being made. I don't recall anybody on the city's team saying, we are making the decision not to repair this roof.
No, we made the decision.
Oh, you made the decision not to repair the roof?
No, we made the decision to fund the repairs. So
correct.
who made the decision not to perform the repairs?
And sorry, that was the question I was attempting to address, but not eloquently. From the development team's perspective, I personally do not recall there being a formal decision being made not to repair the roof by anybody on the city staff. I don't know if this is a function of things drug out. You're hoping it's going to start. You're hoping it's going to start. You're hoping it's going to start, but not trying to defend your staff and why this didn't happen, but just trying to recall if I ever remember somebody saying let's not proceed with this. And I don't recall that conversation.
I honestly thought it had moved forward. I
Yeah.
was shocked when I found out that those repairs that we approved never were made.
Yeah.
When this comes back and now it's a rush, there's a timing issue when we addressed it 4 years ago.
Yeah.
So I do have a little bit of a problem with that.
Understood, yeah, and I think it was last summer about this time. It was this exact same conversation. It was, where are we with the roof? What's going to happen? When is this project starting? And it was like, we cannot go, it slipped right into the winter, and it's like, we cannot let this happen another season. So what are we going to do about this next year?
Well, the funds were
decisions.
approved. The project was approved in 2019.
I think it goes back to one of the bullets that's on the slide. And I don't know the answer 100%. But what I suspect is it's the timing of when we thought the project was going to trigger. So it kind of comes back to the question of when the developer was going to take over that building. Why would CCOB expend those funds if the developer was ready to move forward on the project and take over the building? And so, and again, I can't speak to that. I don't know what the conversations were in 2019, but I do think that that's been part of the challenge, is that we're trying to be fiscally responsible with what we're doing with the money and also trying to make this project go forward. And this is where we are
4 years later,
4 years later.
after we thought we'd solved that problem.
Correct.
Well, the rest of Mr. Stanbridge's email says, we'll do our best to keep things moving forward to allow the building to be put to its new use. Repurposing the building is key to the Civic Center plan and will likely be one of the first components completed. January 24th, 2019.
Yep, times to go again. The history is the history. I can say we sure hope from a development team's perspective, this roof was on there 3-4 years ago whenever it was approved. It's not. We're here before you today asking if we can move this forward.
I hear you. We'll see how that goes. Any other questions? All right. First is council's. No, yeah, never mind. All right, wait till discussion. I think it's a discussion thing, even though I kind of embellished. First is council's consideration of proposed resolution number 2023-106. Will the clerk please read proposed resolution number 2023-106 by title?
Resolution number 2023-106, approving a repair and reimbursement agreement and granting the city and county manager the authority to engage a contractor to complete roof and other improvements of the former Safeway building.
Thank you. Is there a motion? Councilmember Shah?
So moved.
Is there a second? Councilmember Marshall?
Second.
Thank you. Is there any discussion? Councilmember Henkel?
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you for this presentation and some historical perspective, Mayor. I appreciate that. I don't think I was on council in 2019, and it's always hard to kind of oversee. We kind of expect things to happen once we approve it. So that's neither here nor there. I mean, this is what we here are now. I will reiterate that I do want to see in the reimbursement agreement that we have an agreement with not only with our contractor, but with the developer to make sure that they are paying 50%. And I don't know what that looks like from a legal perspective, but I don't want to move forward with this. And then we're left paying the other half as well. So while I am tentatively going to say yes on this, I'm still on the fence. I worry that we're going to be dumping more money into something that isn't moving forward on someone else's end. So I just needed to make sure we're moving forward. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Shah?
Thank you, Mayor. So the Broomfield Town Square project is and has been a very popular project for Broomfield residents. I do know that there are some residents that do not support this project. I appreciate a member of the development team being here tonight. As stated earlier, and as I wrote in my notes just before, the decision tonight is about asset management and ensure the viability of this asset for the future. And I think that for me is my takeaway. You know, I appreciate the developer committing to reimburse up to 50%, though, of course, as Councilmember Henkel noted, this will only happen after the project is financed, and the reimbursement will be paid first from the proceeds of the initial development bonds. When council unanimously approved the PUD for Broomfield Town Square, I had mentioned that the Broomfield taxpayers would be most likely on the hook for about $1.4 million every year. And here we are, the first year spending about that same amount of money. So the city and county of Broomfield continues to move forward in good faith. I believe the development team continues to move forward in good faith. And as the mayor pro tem has stated, let's get this project done before he's off council. So thank you very much, Mayor.
Thank you. Councilmember Ward.
Thank you, Mayor. I have similar concerns that Councilmember Henkel expressed, along with my own concerns that this project will not go forward, and we have spent $1.2 million now for a building that, as we have heard from our staff, does not hold any personal value to us, potentially to other developers, but it could be knocked down, and that'd be $1.2 million that we have, in my opinion, wasted on something else we could use for the community that has a much greater benefit and is guaranteed for us. This project has gone on for far too long. And unlike Councilmember Schaaf, I do not think Town Square is moving in good faith. I know the city has, but I cannot feel that same way for Town Square Alliance. We've continued to see delay after delay after delay, years long worth of delays. I mean, originally this project was supposed to have started 2024, and here we are, maybe 2025 is when we're going to hear this project actually hit construction. I understand staff's comments about liability from an insurance perspective, and that makes this decision even harder for me, because I do not want to put the city in a precarious situation where we are on the hook for paying outright costs if someone were to be injured on the property and there is no insurance due to the state of disrepair. But right now, given the, I think, lack of language in the contract about guaranteeing what the agreed upon price is, I cannot vote for this agreement.
Thank you. Mayor Pro Tem.
Thank you, Mayor. So you've heard a lot of interesting comments tonight, and I totally get where my colleagues are coming from: skepticism, their concern, their anger. This project has it's been going on for at least 8 years since I've been on city council, and I've said that before. And our mayor is right. I do recall in 2019 that we did approve this roof repairs. Mr. Fetterspill, I don't think it was up to you to answer why that didn't happen, because you weren't internal to that. I'm not sure why you were even answering that question, quite honestly. I think that was a staff question, and I'm not sure our staff is, those that were in the know, are not here tonight, unfortunately. So anyways, I do think, though, it's my understanding, what I've heard, at least within the last year, that we are moving in the right direction and things are progressing. So I am hopeful and confident that that is going to remain the case. And I'm not sure you'll get it done by November of this year, but hopefully, I think you said in 2025 first quarter. Still seems way too far off for me, but there are a lot of T's to be crossed and I's to be dotted, and I understand that, and that a lot of that's behind the scenes. And maybe we as a city do need to keep the public informed and let them know that things are progressing. So lots of times when things are going on in the background, people don't see that. They don't think things are happening, but they really are. They just happen in the background. So I think we need to be aware of that, and keep the public aware of that as well. Councilmember Schaaf, I think, sort of boiled this down for me the best. I mean, this isn't asked, it's just a decision of, however we got here today is great to talk about and express anger and skepticism, but it's kind of moot. I mean, we have to make a decision as to the best way to protect this asset today. And from what I heard, there were three options. One was to spend the 1.2 million, or it sounds like up to 1.2 million, and be reimbursed for half of that. So up to 600,000 that's going to come out of the city's pockets. We can let it go, which, in case it's my understanding, is going to be a much more expensive project in the future. Or we can move to demolish it, and from what I heard, that's going to cost at least that much to demolish it. And when I say that, what I heard, between $5 and 500,000 to $1 million to demolish it. And then I'm assuming that would come strictly out of the city's pockets. So, given those options, it's to me, saving this building, reusing, I think that was heard, mentioned as well. And I agree with that to some extent. We would rather reuse than demolish and, build new. So to me, it makes sense to, regardless of the skepticism, concern, and anger, the rational decision here is to save this building at the moment, spend the money, and move forward with this, hopefully move forward with this project and see it come to fruition within the next, year and a half. So I think that's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Marshall Olson.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm going to echo Mayor Pro Tem's comments. This is not a hard decision for me. This is asset management. We have to repair the roof. Not only would demolishing it cost us almost as much money with no reimbursement, but it also sounds like it would likely tank the project or significantly limit it. So I am encouraged that this is moving forward. I know the South Development Plan is coming up soon. I'm looking forward to that, to considering that. As this is Ward 1, which I represent, campaigning, I heard a lot from the neighbors surrounding this community that this is important to them and this is what they wanted to see happen in Broomfield. And so I am happy that it's moving forward. I do believe the developer acting in good faith. I know there's been delays and I'm not happy about that either, but it is where we are. And while how we got here influences our decision, it doesn't really make the decision for me. We have to protect the asset. We have to replace the roof. There isn't really another option. To not do anything opens up to liability and for possible more deterioration of the building, which will cost us more in the future. So I'm going to support this tonight because this is what we have to do. So thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Councilmember Lim.
I'll be brief. I agree with my colleagues who said at this point in time, we are where we are and we have to protect our assets. And I heard that we are waiting for a response from the developer so that the SDP can move forward by September 12th. We've been told for a while now that to expect the SDP on September 12th. So certainly tonight we have to vote on the funding for this roof, but if the developer is acting in good faith, we expect that SDP to come forward very soon. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Anderson.
That was the comment I was going to make, is that, yeah, good faith on our part, and we'll see you September 12th. That's sounds like a great idea. And I'm going to look at this as an asset management piece, and I will say yes, but sounds like this will preserve it. This will be the last time we put money into it. So look forward to that SDP. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other discussion? Well, yeah, it is a very prominent building in our community, and not a week goes by that I don't get asked what's going on with the Safeway for years. So knowing that there's going to be delays in it getting renovated or remodeled, I really think we need to discuss the exterior, and I'm talking about wrapping it. I think that we should at least let the public know that the project is in progress and moving forward. We approved the PUD, and at least let them know coming soon. This is going to be reimagined because it truly is the most common question I'm asked. And this would help allay some of those questions and community concerns about what's going on with the Safeway since it's been sitting vacant for 10 years. So I do want to have that discussion, maybe not tonight, but I think some of us on council would be really interested in looking at the costs of updating that exterior to let the public know something cool is going to happen here. And I guess we'll have to reluctantly approve this asset management again. And hopefully it will be the last time. So we have a motion and a second. Discussion is done. Seeing no further discussion, we'll move forward to the vote on this resolution number 2023-106 as amended. No, it's not amended. All in favor? Let's do a roll call.
Anderson,
Yes.
Cohen,
Yes.
Delgadillo,
Yes.
Henkel,
No.
Jazerski, Leslie,
Yes.
Lim,
Yes.
Marsh Holshin,
Yes.
Schaff,
Yes.
Ward.
No.
Thank you. That passes 8-2. I think we should take our 10-minute recess and we'll be back at 8:19. Thank you. Welcome back. Our next item under council business is the public hearing and council's consideration of proposed resolution number 2023-86 regarding a site development plan for a proposed project in the North Park subdivision within the Baseline community. I'll now declare the public hearing for resolution number 2023-86 open. We'll follow the city's standard public hearing procedures. First, staff will present a summary of the item. Next, we'll have the applicant's presentation. Then we'll ask for public comments and finally comments from the applicant and then questions from members of the city council. Council has a copy of the agenda memorandum, which I'll ask our staff to summarize.
Thank you, Mayor. So I'm going to ask Ms. Lynn Merwin to join us at the podium. She's going to walk us through this item. Thanks, Lynn.
Thank you. Good evening, Mayor, Mayor Pro Tem, Council. Next slide, please. The proposal this evening, thank you, is for a site development plan for the Parkland South Open Lands located in the Baseline community in North Broomfield. The property is generally located north of 160th and east of Sheridan Parkway. Next slide, please. This slide shows a Parkland South Open Lands parcel anchoring the southwest end of the larger Open Lands corridor that will extend along the Preble Creek drainageway alignment through the Baseline development between West 160th Avenue on the southwest to the future Center Street on the northeast. This is the second SDP presented to council for the larger Open Lands corridor in the Baseline community. And just as a reminder, in June, council approved plans for the 25-acre Big Green located to the northeast of this application. Next slide, please. The Broomfield Comprehensive Plan land use designation for the property are open lands and mixed use commercial, and the subject proposal is consistent with the comprehensive plan designation for the property. This helps support the comprehensive plan goal of providing a robust and interconnected park and open land system. Next slide, please. The property is zoned PUD for planned unit development and is governed by the North Park PUD plan approved in 2009 and amended from time to time. This slide shows the proposed 12-acre open lands parcel within the context of the surrounding area. The property will serve as a recreational amenity and buffer between the office flex light industrial uses built to the east along 160th Avenue and the future residential homes planned to the west and known as the Southlands development. There is to the north and south are existing and planned open lands. The proposal includes master planned stormwater improvements to the Preble Creek drainageway in support of the community, a 12-foot wide regional trail in concrete with an additional 3-foot crusher fine path on one side, a 10-foot wide sidewalk or trail along the western boundary of the property adjacent to the future Promenade Street, as well as landscaping, wayfinding signs, pet and trash waste stations, and benches. The Parkland South Open Lands parcel will be dedicated to the city and county of Broomfield within 10 years of completion of construction. In the near term, the owner will grant a public access easement over the property. And the Metro District for this area will maintain the property while in their ownership and after dedication of the property to Broomfield. And I should have prefaced that part by saying in accordance with the managed growth and development agreement for this property. Next slide, please. This slide shows the various phases of the open lands and the regional trail improvements planned through the development. This segment of open lands is shown in light blue on the lower left and is expected to be part of phase 2 following development of the Big Green further north in the green color. Next slide, please. The SDP proposes a mix of on-street and off-street trails that collectively offer a 1/2 mile looped walk with this phase. Eventually, the 12-foot regional trail will extend northeast to the future Huron Street roadway alignment near Colorado 7. Next slide, please. In summary, the applicant has held a neighborhood meeting and that was done in April of 2022. The application did qualify for a waiver of the concept review process, so there was no formal concept review. And the required public notices have been met and there are no key issues for this application. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Merwin. Next is the applicant presentation. Just as we ask our staff to keep their presentation brief, I ask the applicant to be concise. I wish I could be in their presentation. Please introduce yourself.
Good evening,
Mayor Pro Tem and council members. I'm Mike McBride with McWinney and yeah, we're going to present our Parkland South open lands. I've got with me Ty with Wenck Associates. They're our master plan landscape architects for the Parklands area. So let's go next slide. So we saw this almost the same presentation 2 months ago. So I'm just gonna go through it and you know, if we have any questions, I've got all my exhibits here to kind of go back on if we've got any questions. So you know, just like to touch on the guiding principles, which is you know, environmental stewardship, healthy living and innovation. And we do try to embed that in every project. We've got a baseline. And I think we've got that in this project here too. So next slide. So we came and showed you the big green 2 months ago. This is almost kind of the polar opposite of what the big green was, as the big green was a turf field and kind of amenitized promenade. The Parkland South is kind of more of what the character of the Parklands will be. It's kind of native Colorado landscape, the regional trail, and kind of this great open space that gives some breathing room to the neighborhoods in Baseline. And it's on the very south end of the project here, and so these Parklands phases will kind of start marching north after we build the Parkland South. Next slide. This is our phasing diagram, and again, you know, all the linear part or the Parklands phases are triggered by adjacent development. So this one is being triggered by the Southlands, which we hope to start later this year. Next slide. And then again, you know, these are in green. These are our parcels that we plan to dedicate to the city of Broomfield, City County of Broomfield, and again, almost all the Parklands areas. I think it's over 60 acres of land will be dedicated to the City County of Broomfield. Next slide. This is just our overall trail system. You know, our red line there is our regional trail. Starts at the 160th, and it's going to go all the way up past Highway 7 with underpasses at every major street crossing. So that's kind of one of the highlights of this plan. Next slide. This just shows our interconnected, you know, the way we've interconnected the trail system and the park system to our neighborhoods, and been very intentional, you know, connecting the neighborhoods through greenways to the park system to make it easy for all the residents to access the park system. Next slide. And here I'm going to let Ty kind of talk about the design a little bit and what we've got going on.
Thanks, Mike. I'm Ty Sturgeon with Wenck Associates. We're landscape architects from Denver, consulting for McWinney on this project. So phase 2 is about 12 acres. It clearly focuses on Preble Creek as a focal point of this piece of the park, as most of the Parklands does. We're constructing Preble Creek to have a naturalistic feel with a meandering flow, no visible drop structures. It'll feel like a prairie stream as it goes through here. We're lining the creek with numerous cottonwoods in the lower reaches, using a variety of sizes. I think we talked about this a little bit when we presented phase 1 a few weeks ago, as far as using small containers up to big containers so we get a naturalistic canopy. The rest of the site will be a mix of native grasses. We have 3 different blends going in depending on our elevation above the water and what's going on, including some riparian mixes. The regional trail is there. It's the meandering trail that goes north to south. And that will be the first phase of the regional trail we build at Baseline, 12-foot wide with a 3-foot crusher fine shoulder. And then we're also going to build the 10-foot trail that parallels Promenade Street. We're going to plant trees along Promenade Street and the tree lawn. And then we'll have a 10-foot connection back to the development on the north end, so that Southlands, people who live in the Southlands community can make a loop even in an early phase. And then as we progress, the regional trail will connect all the way to Highway 7 in future phases. Next slide. This is a view looking north where the regional trail forks from Promenade. So the industrial building is on our right, Promenade Street in the Southlands neighborhood on our left. So you can see the 12-foot trail, the crusher fine shoulder, Promenade Street sidewalk to the left, and then a view of the pretty natural sort of Colorado Front Range stream character of this part of the park. And then the next slide. This is now looking back south towards 160th. So Flex is on our left now and Southland's on our right. This is demonstrating how we will anticipate interacting with the creek and trying to get some double duty out of certain areas like what's labeled as the maintenance path. We do have a few outfalls coming from the Southlands neighborhood into the park, and we're going to embellish those and then use the maintenance path as opportunity to bring park users closer to the creek. But again, the natural character cottonwood trees that we hope will grow fast. In the upland areas, we do have more of your typical park trees like coffee trees, honey locusts, and things like that. But when we're down in the approximately 120-foot wide creek corridor, we'll be using cottonwoods. So that's all we have for the look and feel.
okay.
If there's any questions.
Wait for more. Well, thank you so much for the brief presentation. We will move on to public comment next. If you'd like to comment on this item, please come to the podium. You know the drill.
Roxy Jula Lockmore. This is going to be a perfect park on both sides of 160th. Hopefully 160th is going to be wide enough so we never have to worry about tearing up the park to make the road wider. One of the things I know what they're saying that they're going to use for the vegetation and everything, but I just want it to be put on record, and I've already mentioned it to them, that crab apples are a very fast growing, but a very beautiful springtime flowering tree, but they're extremely high maintenance in the fall when all those little itsy bitsy little apples fall down and they turn into mush. And that mush down in that wetland would bring in all kinds of critters that are not good for a park. Rats, mice, snakes. Just imagine walking down the trail and having to avoid some of these things. Skunks. We have enough skunks as it is already. We don't really need to have crab apples brought in to make it worse. Regular apples, though, don't seem to do so much like that because there's not that many of those little things that get to be mushy, and they're really hard to clean up too. Over 30 years ago, down on Midway in Broomfield, the city, it was just a city back then, the city kind of learned, and so did a lot of the residents. Midway from Wadsworth Boulevard to Main Street had a whole bunch of crabapple trees. And we learned over time that every fall, if we didn't get them cleaned up before the snow came, it was just like having a slippery ice track for everybody to try to drive on. So a lot of the people took some of their crab apples out on their own, and some of them were on city land and they got removed, and now we have different trees there. We still have a few crab apples and they're still very pretty, but we don't have the mess that we had before. So I'm sorry, we don't need crab apples, and it's not a native of Colorado anyway.
Thank you. Anyone else? All right, we'll move on to questions from City Council. Members should limit themselves to questions during this portion, and the time to introduce amendments for against this item is later. I've got some eager council members. We'll go in order. Councilmember Leslie, Henkel, and Cohen on that side.
Thank you, Mayor. I have a tree concern
Oh, no. Okay.
also, and I was concerned after the last presentation about all the cottonwoods. Cottonwoods take a lot of water. They require a lot of water, and they grow fast, but they grow big and take even more water. And it's hard to tell, obviously, from the images, how many you plan to plant, but it sounds like quite a lot to get the canopy that you're looking for. So kind of baseline question, what's the source of the water for the creek?
So the water in the creek is 100% runoff from upstream and from the developments we'll be building. And the reason the cottonwoods are limited to the floodplain, which is about 120 feet wide, centered on the creek, is because we will have that available water as well as a high groundwater table that has been an issue on phases of the creek we've constructed to date. So we're trying to kind of turn that high groundwater, which can be a problem, into an amenity, use it to water these trees. We're not proposing any irrigation within that 120-foot corridor. We will have irrigation upstream of that for the other trees and native grass, but it should be damp enough in that corridor. We're not irrigating any of the cottonwoods or the native seed in that bottom area.
And so approximately how many cottonwoods do you see in this South Park area?
I could pull up the STP, but I think we had about 80. We have to be a little bit conscious of floodplain and everything. We had more at one time.
Yeah, no, and again, that's part of what I'm raising. The water being such a big issue here. Again, it's always looking for that balance, but if the water dries up, then those trees are going to die. Right? And the source of that water is natural groundwater and natural runoff.
That's right. And we anticipate that there's water there now, and we anticipate that increasing as we build Southlands in that impervious area.
Well, I just would caution, I don't know that much about crab apples. That was good. I learned a little bit about that tonight, but I know cottonwoods are more indigenous to Colorado than.
Yeah, we're proposing 2 different species on this site, and both of them are natives to Colorado and typical of what you would see in a natural stream in this area, sort of pre-agriculture.
Yeah, you said that, and I appreciate that. I just am concerned about overdoing it, so.
Our civil engineer won't let me overdo it because he's concerned about conveying the water.
Well, I don't know him, so I can't trust.
I tried.
I know you now, and I have to trust you, but I just, it's that balance, and I just want to make sure we're not overdoing the trees, because trees are such a demand, users of water, and we just have to be so much more careful. And I wonder if that runoff would be better served going somewhere else and not up into the canopy. That's all I'm primarily concerned about. I don't have a recommendation. I'm not saying I'm not going to support it. I just want us to be more thoughtful and cautious about adding more trees to what is predominantly grassland.
And I would defend the idea of the tree canopy by saying there are trees volunteering on the phase of the creek we've built already. There are cottonwoods coming up on their own. So that's telling us it is appropriate here. We have an ecologist on board. We have a very robust design review committee who all were in support of cottonwoods, as well as the Parks and Open Space Department, who were advocating for more shade. They say that's something they get asked for most often, especially on these trail systems. So we feel like we've struck a good balance between the cottonwood trees in the lower end, more park trees on the upper end, and being water conscious, because McWinney doesn't want to buy any more irrigation water than they have to
Well,
either.
and if you can have some trees propagate themselves and you're saving a lot of money, you don't have to buy 80 new trees. You can just let them seed themselves. But typically they don't grow in that kind of cluster. I mean, cottonwoods are somewhat independent trees.
Well, and the nursery grown trees that we will be purchasing typically don't make cotton. So these really are coming from native trees somewhere upstream that we're seeing volunteer.
Thank you.
Councilmember Henkel.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you for presentation. And I really appreciate the fact that there's some crusher pines next to that pathway. I know a lot of runners don't like to use the concrete to run on, so this is important so that we can have not only bikers and other people using wheeled devices, but we also have people who can run on there too. So I appreciate that. Couple questions. The first question is, how long is the pathway? I am forgetting, or maybe I'm not seeing it.
This portion of it from 160th up to Preble Creek Parkway is just under half a mile.
Okay. Okay. And then I'm not seeing any lighting along, like in any of the design plans. Is there any plans for any lighting?
We're not currently lighting the trail. There will be lighting on Promenade Street.
Do we feel like that's going to be enough lighting to cover that area?
I don't think it will be light down to the creek, which is
Okay.
beneficial from a habitat standpoint, but in areas where the trail gets closer to the creek, it won't be lit.
Okay. I just have kind of safety concerns about that, if we can work on some sort of lighting, but I'll add that later to my comments. I don't think I have any other questions right now. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Lim.
Yes, on the border between, let's see, on the eastern border where intersects with the westernmost light industrial building. Is there the possibility of any fencing along that light industrial building before we get to the open space? Is there, did the developer think about that? And then my question for staff would be, do we have any other example elsewhere in Broomfield where we have light industrial bordering open space? And then is there any barrier between the two?
I'm not sure that formally buffers or borders open space, but the one I'm thinking of is Interpark on Main Street and 112th. There are two large light industrial, office flex light industrial buildings there. And to the north is Airport Creek and that drainage way, and there's a trail along there. And then there's the Broomfield Industrial Park ball fields. So we don't have, there's a safety fence for a small portion of it on the north side of Reed Street that comes out of Interpark onto Main Street. But I can't think of a place where we've had fencing, unless Kristen can. Anna suggested that there's some is there fencing there? Oh, okay. 800 Hoyt Street's another place where there's a light industrial building, but there's no fencing. So normally I think there isn't fencing delineating the two uses. They kind of blend together or transition.
Well, I guess this is a open space question. And I mean, has there ever been a conversation at open space? In the open space realm where you look at, there's going to be a large volume of people using this open space and it borders the light industrial building, and we should consider some kind of safety barrier. Has there ever been a discussion of that?
I'm going to ask Kristen Pritz, our Director of Open Space and Trails, to join us.
Thank you. Kristen Pritz, Director of Open Space and Trails. So for this site, we were actually thinking that it would be very positive to have some kind of a trail coming from the industrial light flex buildings into this site. So employees in those buildings could come and enjoy the open lands. So that's really where we were coming from. I've been out to that site many a time, and I don't sense a big industrial impact with noise or smells or anything like that. So in the future, I think we're hoping that perhaps there can be some kind of a connection for employees to come down into that space. And I think the plan showed some potential proposed trail connection there.
Okay, thank you for that perspective.
Sure.
There are shown on page 9 some ovals for future amenities. What amenities did you particularly have in mind that we could preview?
So as you know, as Southlands builds out and we've got, we get residents in there and we kind of hear from those residents, we do have, we've reserved some spaces, specifically like between the street side sidewalk and the regional trail. And then again, like on the east side of the channel for future amenities, whether that's a dog park or a BMX kind of loop track. We kind of want the residents to come in and kind of help guide us on what amenities, we can provide in there.
Okay, thank you.
Kristen does not like the BMX idea.
I would just add to that, if you view the rendered plan, I think it was two, 3 slides back. we've anticipated that in the grading plan. You'll see in that rendered plan, the white lines are contour lines. So we've just made flat pads that would maximize McWhinney's ability to add things there without tearing the whole side up. So we're sort of consider it park pad ready, I guess, for whatever the community desires at the time.
Okay, thank you for that. The map on page 7 shows where the one peonade well is smack in the middle of the Parkland South. Is the path, there is no map drawn on this where the P&A well is to show where the trail exactly is going through. So my question is, are we sure that the concrete trail is not going over the P&A well? Because that would be an access problem for maintenance.
Right, not just an access problem, but we run into issues. Sorry, Anna Burton-Zetti, Planning Director. And good evening. We have run into issues with compaction to create those trails on top of the peonade wells. So that is something we look at with the construction documents to make sure that there is not a conflict between the placement of the well, any of those compaction areas for any of the services.
Okay, thank you. Those are my questions.
Thank you. Any other council member questions on this item? Seeing there are no further questions, the public hearing is closed. Next is council's consideration of proposed resolution number 2023-86. Will the clerk please read proposed resolution number 2023-86 by title?
Resolution number 2023-86, approving the North Park filing number 2, replat F, lot 1, block 13, Parkside South Open Lands Site Development Plan.
Thank you. Is there a motion? Okay, Councilmember Ward.
I move that resolution number 2023-86 be adopted.
Thank you. Is there a second? Councilmember Henkel.
Second.
Thank you. Is there any discussion? Councilmember Henkel.
Yeah, I would just like to reiterate, if we can look into some lighting along that pathway just to make it more safe. I don't know how many lumens or foot candles that might look like in that area, but I would really appreciate just a look at that and seeing from a safety perspective if we have enough lighting over there. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Any other discussion? Seeing none, we'll move forward with the vote on resolution number 2023-86. All in favor? Any opposed? That passes unanimously. Thank you all very much. Have a good night. Our final item under council business this evening is resolution number 2023-103, authorizing the city and county manager to approve an amendment to Fairfield's Residential's Improvement Agreement concerning affordable housing. Council has a copy of the agenda memorandum, which I'll ask our staff to summarize.
Thank you, Mayor. Anna Burton-Zetti, our Director of Planning and Co-Director of Community Development. She's up.
Right. Thank you. Good evening again, Mayor Pro Tem, City Council, Anna Burton-Zetti, Co-Director of Community Development. If I could have the next slide, please. So this project was originally in front of all of you at the end of last year. It was approved in the Highlands PUD area. It includes 297 residential units. That was approved and intended at the time that it was approved. It included inclusionary housing units in compliance with our Broomfield Municipal Code. So that would be 20% of the units at 60% of the area median income. This means that 60 units of the 297 units that were approved for Fairfield residential, and I should say, in case anyone's listening, Highlands is north of Colorado 7 and just east of Sheridan Parkway. So 60 of the 297 units that were originally approved here were committed to being income aligned units. At the time of the approval, the only incentive that was provided to the developer in order to provide these units was the typical permit fee reductions that are provided for all income aligned units that are provided in compliance with the code. Next slide, please. So since that initial approval last December, the developer has been working to finalize their construction plans to move forward with construction. And during this time, they determined that the project could not be implemented with this previous commitment. The developer recently submitted a request for City Council to consider an alternative agreement, which is allowed under the code. And after meeting with staff, they did make some additional adjustments to that original proposal, and that's what's in front of City Council this evening. Instead of the 20% of the units at 60% AMI, they are proposing 23.57% of the units at 80% AMI. This is an increase of 10 additional units, so there'd be a total of 70 of the units being provided at a being provided at 80%, no more than 80% AMI. Since these units are no longer consistent with the typical on-site affordability levels required of the municipal code, the incentives for the on-site units related to the building fee reduction would no longer be applicable. This request is being brought forward to for the City Council's consideration, since only City Council is authorized to review and consider alternative amendments, of which this would be an alternative amendment, if I can talk this evening, since the developer is providing more units, but at a lower affordability level, or a lesser affordability level. If council considers this request, then resolution number 2023-103 would do two things. It would approve this alternative agreement for the inclusionary units, and it would also authorize the city manager to make an amendment to the subdivision improvement agreement that was approved for this project to reflect that new agreement. This concludes staff's presentation, and the applicant is here this evening to talk through their proposal.
Thank you. Will the applicant please come to the podium and identify themselves?
Yes, good evening, Mayor, Mayor Pro Tem, members of the council. I'm Ed McCord with Fairfield Residential. Well, it's good to see everyone tonight. It wasn't our intention to come back and see you again. So don't take that wrong, but we thought we had this basically locked and loaded, if you would. What we've done since, go ahead and go to the slide 4 since it's late, and we'll just jump right to the chase here.
Okay.
Go forward. Right there. What happened is, since our approval in December, we closed on the land and we have completed our construction documents. We sent our construction documents out to bid and they came back and shockingly high. In that same period of time, we did additional site analysis conducted for the soil. And we determined that because of the soil and the existing infrastructure that was installed in the interim between the time we got involved with the project and to the time we got into our construction documents, utilities have been installed around the property that prevented us from overlaying the grading, and we had to do shoring. Shoring in and of itself added about $1.7 million. Additionally, regulations have changed. The city's adopted new energy codes, as the state has. That has caused additional $1 million+ increases. And obviously, as everybody knows, when they go buy something at the store, costs have gone up across the board. I mean, even I was listening tonight, since 2019, your roofing went up significantly. So we were shocked the amount of increase it was about over $3 million in hard costs and labor that we have to account for now in the project. So having all this hit us at one time is kind of a perfect storm. We realized, Houston, we have a problem. And what we wanted to do was try to formulate a response to the city that was a win-win situation. Fairfield, we do have an affordable housing arm, and we do have thousands of units that we have ownership and management. So we're very familiar with affordable housing, and it's very dear to our heart. So we still want to make sure that we give an offer that provides affordable housing. And if we can't do it at the level that we agreed to initially, we'd give you more units. And that's where we came back. And the 80% is the high end of the low income range. So 60 to 80 is low income. We wanted to stay within the low income and offer you additional units. We also understand that the housing division reported in April on your needs assessment that they're really focusing on the 80 to 120% AMI because there's other services and incentives for other developers to provide at the lower levels. So we're thinking that the 80% is a target for this, for the city and county. It's also within the low income range. And we thought, okay, we can make it work. Potentially, we still have our work to do on the hard cost, but it's a multifaceted problem that requires a multifaceted solution. I will note for everyone's knowledge as well, that when we closed on the land, the landowner also reduced the price a little bit to help us because, as I said, it's multifaceted. So providing 10 additional apartments at the low income range helps obviously Broomfield with your needs assessment, your goals. Housing in this location, as we said back in December, supports the local retailers, the local job support, local jobs, as well as your transportation goals for the area. And finally, don't lose sight that we are providing a turnkey park. There's a 9.6 acre park included with this project that we'll be developing and also handing over to the city when it's done. So what this allows for is units now, rather than having us hold off and try to find the market conditions that would basically support what we had agreed to. So not happy that I have to do this. I haven't had to ask councils for any support since 2009. It's been a long time, but unfortunately, this project and our position is such that we need to ask for this assistance. And with that, I respectfully request that you approve it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Busey and Ms. Burton-Zetti. We'll now proceed with public comments. If there's anyone who'd like to comment on this item, please come to the podium. Please state your name and neighborhood for the record and limit your comments to 3 minutes.
Try this again. Mayor Castriata, council members and manager's office. Chris Hammerschmidt, Willow Run Division. This goes back to my earlier comment. Sorry you have to see me again, but the reasons that he stated in your letter are cost escalations due to inflation, costly code regulatory requirements, and a geotechnical study that they have to mitigate some soil stuff. Inflation goes back to government spending. Every time government spends something, it costs more money. And inflation is from the Biden administration, federal, state, local. It all goes back to that. Regulatory requirements, those come from the state and the local government. So what he's telling you is that he's finding it unaffordable to even build. And what happens is you're kicking out people who can't afford. It's 60% AMI. I just want you to understand that the lower income people, like I said, with Thomas Sowell, are the ones that get hurt by these policies. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? All right, we'll go to council questions next. Please limit yourselves to questions during this portion. The time to introduce amendments and state positions for or against this item is later. Councilmember Cohen.
Thank you, Mayor. I just wanted to go over the differences in terms of real costs for the renters. I would imagine that 60% AMI, the rent will be somewhere in the neighborhood of $1,650. Am I correct? A month? Or could you tell us what the monthly rate differences are?
Yeah, full disclosure, full transparency. The difference between 60 and 80% is in the $300 to $400 a month range.
So from 1,800 to maybe 2,200, something like that.
Yeah.
So the difference of going from 60 units to 70 units, but at a higher rate, would increase the annual income $500,000 or more, or 700,000.
I don't have those numbers, but I would trust your math for the 10 extra units, is that what we're asking?
Right.
Yeah.
So the annual increase in income for you would be somewhere between $500,000 and $1 million.
Yes.
Right. So I guess I'm asking just to put it in real terms of the cost, where it comes up, why you can't afford this due to your extra costs versus the long-term costs to the community? Because it does concern me, the loss of actual, there is so little available in our community for that 60% AMI. It just seems impossible to get, and I hate to lose it. So I'm just sort of trying to figure out how this math works in that sense.
So one of the main issues is that the investment community, because of the interest rate hikes, because of the extra cost of development, because everything is costing more, their thresholds of return has gone up. And what they look at is when the threshold goes up, you have to have more income on the back end to support that. And what's happening is that with the lower 60%, you don't have the income coming in to support the higher threshold of a return on costs.
Have you calculated what difference it would be in terms of paying off your notes? Are you adding a certain amount of time, and how much more increased cost to you to cover these additional costs?
I don't have that offhand. I'm sorry about that.
All right, thank you. That's it.
Okay, thank you. And next is Councilmember Marshall.
Thank you, Mayor. Councilmember Cohen asked my question about the difference in rent cost. But one follow-up to that, did you consider looking at keeping some at the 60% level and then adding additional at the 80%, maybe more or less, or I guess that's my question.
Yeah, it's interesting because we've been working with staff, and I want to thank staff, by the way, Anna, Jeff, Rachel, Jennifer, everybody's been great. There's so many different ways to slice this. You can look at it, by making the 60%, or excuse me, by making, the 60% at 10% and the rest at 80%. We tried to make it as simple as possible because of the total number of different options that we have. We're just astronomical. And for us, we have our construction documents done. We were trying to find a solution that got us where we needed to go so we can submit them to the city and we can be under construction as soon as possible.
Okay, thank you, Mayor.
All right, thank you. Councilmember Shah.
Thank you, Mayor. So hopefully pretty quickly, I just have one question. In 2020, Council approved Resolution 2020-202 authorizing building fee waivers for permanently affordable housing. And I was curious with this project, are there going to be any building fee waivers going to this, or were there any building fee waivers going to this project? And with this change from 60% AMI to 80% AMI, will those building fee waivers still go to this project?
So that's a good question, Councilmember Schaaf. So Anna kind of built that into her presentation a little bit. So what I understand, Anna, keep me honest here, is at 60% AMI, there could have been qualification for some incentives through fee waivers. Now, obviously not for water or sewer. There's some fees we don't waive, right, at 50%. But now that they're at the 80% level, that option for those fee waivers at that 50% has gone away. Anna, is that correct?
Thank you. That's a really good summary. I think the only thing I would add is the quick disclaimer that unless city council were to grant that as part of an alternative agreement, which is not being requested this evening, but that would be the only way to apply it to a project that was not 20% of the units at 60% for an apartment complex that's rental and more than 10 units.
Excellent. Thank you for that answer. That's all I have, Mayor.
All right, thank you. Councilmember Lim.
I had a question about the geotechnical finding with the soil. It might be for staff and not the developer. So should this have been a surprise that there were soil conditions in this area? I'm most familiar with the conversation, which was prominent when we talked about the Flatiron development, where, we asked many different ways. Do you have to, consider the soil conditions? Is this a new finding up north of Colorado 7, or is it the same situation that should have been anticipated?
So council member, as with all of our developments, there are different levels of engineering reports that are required with a PUD plan, with a site development plan, and then a very refined level that is required once they get to the construction document phase. So with each of those, there is some amount of learning that the geotechnical study provides to the development team to help guide them. So although we are aware that generally speaking, Broomfield has expansive soils, we make sure to communicate that with developers that are new to the area. I think this, and I will ask the applicant to go into more detail about exactly what the finding was in this case. But generally speaking, there is a knowledge about the soils, but as they're working towards the construction document, there's additional information that refines the method for construction, and then that can drive up costs. And I'll let them talk to the details in this particular instance.
Thank you, Anna. Mayor Pro Tem, council members. Yeah, we did a preliminary geotech study, obviously, and just so everyone knows, we are building the Arista project right now. So we have a good baseline. We had what we thought was a good baseline. We knew there was over excavation and recompaction required. The problem is when we did our original analysis, the dry utilities were not installed around the property. When you go back and they've been installed, took a little longer to get the entitlement, everything takes longer. In real estate development, everything takes longer and costs more. That's the bottom line. So what happened was we got to a position where we were looking at the geotech and we couldn't lay out the soil. We couldn't lay back the soil because the utility lines have been installed. So we had to stop our grading operation before we originally anticipated because the utilities were between our property and the road. So now we have to put a shoring to protect the existing utilities that weren't there when we did our initial analysis. And that was the primary reason why we have to do the you have to do the shoring.
Okay, thank you. This question is probably for our Deputy Director of Economic Vitality and from the housing perspective. So the applicant referred to the fact that, and I do recall that we heard a report that we're trying to address that 80% housing need, 80% AMI housing need more directly. So we don't have a recommendation that I saw in our memo. I looked for it to say if economic vitality and housing thinks this is a good deal. Let's put it bluntly, is this a good deal? Does it meet our housing needs? I'd like to hear that from you.
Thank you for the question, Councilmember Lim. So again, Rachel King, Deputy Director, Economic Vitality and Development. Generally speaking, our updated housing needs from this year, 2023, still shows a housing gap, right, in the rental market. So we are trying to fill that gap specifically to 80%. We didn't see a gap there. However, we understand that filling the gap through a multitude of different AMI products will help relieve the pressure in one area or the other. Staff does not have a pointed recommendation on this proposal for this evening.
Okay. Then can you answer this question? Do you see this, if council were to approve this in this situation, do you see this as precedent setting? That there would be other developments that, well, unfortunately, we don't have as many developments who have actually included the affordable housing as we would like in the first place. They still end up with cash in lieu too much. But, do you see this as precedent setting that we're going to end up with other developments backtracking or coming forward and saying, well, they didn't do it. We don't want to do it either.
I can address that initially, and then I'll pass it over to Deputy City Manager Yeoman. But I believe that is up for you to decide personally. But Ms. Yeoman.
Well, and I think the thing that I've heard in these conversations is we're probably going to see more of this. And some of this is some of the challenges that the applicant has mentioned that developers are facing. So it really does, there may be more of it just because of the environment we're in right now. And so again, I think Rachel is correct, or Ms. King is correct. I think it's up to council to decide what makes sense from your perspective in regards to what moves us forward on our goals. And also has the applicant done their due diligence in this case to bring forward a strong case for why they need this change?
Okay, thank you.
Councilmember Lim, if I could just add on the sort of legal concept of precedent. I think the way we do our public hearings, the thoughtful questions that council provides, the staff reports, the applicant reports, each development is very specific. So yes, why somebody in the future might say, well, you did it for that applicant, why not me? I feel like in our discussions, council would be able to say, well, here's why not you. So I think each development is so different in the community, especially as you pointed out, the few that are providing these type of units, that I don't think that there would be an argument that just because you did it here, you'd have to do it in the future.
Okay, good. Thank you. Those are my questions.
All right, thank you. Any other council member questions? Councilmember Ward.
Thank you, Mayor. If council decides not to grant this variance, what happens? What is the next step for you guys as the developer?
We would wait because we wouldn't, our investment partners won't let us move forward with the returns that are set based on the current approval. So as I said, it's multifaceted. We're working every step that we can. Landowner was kind enough to help us, asking the city to help us. We still have to go out and talk to all of our subs as well and have them help us as well. So we have work ahead of us. But it's work that we'll do. If we're not able to adjust as we're asking for, then we'll probably just sit and wait.
Okay. I guess maybe this is more of a follow-up question from Councilmember Cohen's original question. The increase from 20% to 23.7 or whatever the exact number was, but 60 to 70 units. Can you walk me through the math of how increasing the total number of units that are income restricted pencils out, but keeping them at 60% less, 60% or less for AMI, but a lower total number of income restricted units pencils out?
I will do my best. I'm a planner by background, not an economist. But it all comes down to net operating income and the income that you get with 80% AMI with the 70 units allows you to address the higher returns required from the investor. With the 60% AMI, you don't have the net operating income that would help them achieve the return on cost that they're looking for. And that's as simple as I can get. And that's probably the level that I know at this point.
All right, well, I will have to take that answer. So I think those are all my questions. Thank you, Mayor.
All right, thank you. Councilmember Marshallson, did you have a question? You have a question face.
Yeah, I just had a follow-up question
Okay.
based on what Councilmember Ward just asked you. So you're getting an extra $300 a month for those first 60 units. But you're losing money on the 70, on the extra 10 off what's the decrease in rent?
From the 80 to market?
From the market to the 80, yeah, on those 10 units.
Oh. I'm gonna say it's probably about $200. Because 80 is obviously a lot closer to market rate than 60 is. But I don't know the exact number offhand of what the 80 versus market would be. And again, we're projecting out the time we start delivering units, but I don't have that answer.
So what is your timeline to have these units up and available for lease if we approve versus if we don't?
We'll be submitting the construction documents through plan check 6 months. So we would be looking at starting first quarter next year.
If we approve it, and if we don't, it's
Then we'll.
indefinite.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you, Mayor.
All right, thank you. Any other questions?
Mayor, if I could, I just
Sure,
want
Mr.
to
Omine.
help with that last question, and that is the difference between the rents for an 80% down to 60 or 60 to 80 is the same difference as 80 to 100.
Okay.
It is exactly the same amount, and it's roughly actually $550 per unit. So each of those 20% gaps is that amount. We're looking at the Chaffa tables as they exist today. So not to put anybody on the spot, but we figured we'd look it up.
All right.
Thank
I
you.
appreciate that. Thank you, Mr. Romine. Well, my question is, the engineering challenges of the geography of this area, obviously. It is standard practice to have to perform those surveys and those impact compaction and stuff like that. That's standard practice to build in Broomfield, pretty much.
Correct. And we did that.
So that's not due to government regulation.
No.
All
No,
right.
and then, excuse me, Madam Mayor, what I was saying that there's multiple levels of issues here. One is obviously regulatory, one is site conditions.
Oh, I know.
Okay.
I just wanted to clarify that for the folks at home. And why does the state update their energy codes for us to adopt? Why do they do that?
Thank you. I'll take that question. So
Thank you, Ms. Burton.
So one of the reasons that the state passed the bill a few years ago to create the model energy code was to create a level playing field so that the requirements were common across the entire state. It also helps the state to achieve its greenhouse gas reduction goals throughout the state with all of its communities.
And let's go a little deeper. Why do we have greenhouse gas reduction goals?
For all of our environmental sustainability, for the health of our residents, for the health of our community, of our environment, all of those very big goals.
For the climate
For the
crisis
climate, for
that we're
crisis, yes,
in,
all of that.
Which is factual. Okay, thank you very much. Those are all my questions. Next is council's consideration of proposed resolution number 2023-103. Will the clerk please read proposed resolution number 2023-103 by title?
Resolution number 2023-103, authorizing the city and county manager to approve an amendment to the Highlands filing number 1, replat F lots 1 and 9 and tracks A and B improvement agreement concerning affordable housing and approving an alternative agreement for meeting the on-site affordable units required by section 17-76-020 BMC.
Thank you. Is there a motion? Councilmember Ward.
I move that resolution number 2023-103 be adopted.
Thank you. Is there a second? Councilmember Henkel.
Second.
Is there any discussion? Councilmember Marsh Holshan?
Thank you, Mayor. This is a tough one for me. Affordable housing is important, and the fact that we have a limit, we don't have enough housing for those of the low income is important. And I think that's something that we should be addressing. And it's the reason we have the 60% AM or the 80%, the 60% AMI requirement. That said, I do think that I'm going to support this tonight because I do think that we are doing something more than with nothing. I mean, if we didn't approve this, it wouldn't go forward at least anytime soon. There are cost increases. I understand that. And I think that's something that we should be doing. I understand that the cost increase due to the soil, that's important. As the mayor mentioned, the regulatory changes are important. And these are things that are essential to our community. These regulatory things are essential. They do add cost. I recognize that. But that's why we subsidize. That's why we build in affordable housing. That's why we look to the federal and state governments to help fund these projects. It's the role of government to help subsidize housing in general, but also because we have these regulations. And then the inflation, I do understand the costs have increased. The costs have not increased because inflation is not due to government spending. It is due to spending in the wrong areas. And the inflation we're seeing now is because of the market shift dramatically due to COVID. I mean, it messed everything up. And that's what we need to do. Inflation is when resources are not allocated to the things that markets that can handle the cost and not too technical. So I understand where this cost is coming from. I support this reluctantly, but thank you for bringing it forward to us. Thanks.
Thank you. Councilmember Delgadillo.
Thank you, Mayor. It is a bit of a bummer, I will say, but this still does fill a gap. I do like the density of this development and I like that this is extra housing supply. If this project were to come before us today, I don't think I would have any reservations in supporting it. So that's where my decision comes from. Also, I'd like to point out that as someone who just closed on a house, I'm really glad that the soil underneath my house was treated. So we are much more less likely to have foundation issues. Obviously, that added a lot of cost, but it added quite a bit of peace of mind for myself. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councilmember Schaaf.
Thank you, Mayor. In previous years, we've received a fair amount of cash in lieu dollars, yet, as what we've seen, it's very expensive to build these units, and we haven't built these units at below 100% AMI quickly enough. So, if this particular, as Councilmember Delgadillo said, if this particular development came before me in 2022 with 70 units at 80% AMI, I would have likely supported it at that point as well. So hopefully if my council colleagues join me in approving this agreement tonight, I don't want you to take this the wrong way, but I hope I don't see you before the ribbon cutting. Thanks.
Before the Safeway roof is replaced, you mean? I'm sorry. Ooh. Couldn't resist. All right, any other discussion? Councilmember Henkel.
Thank you, Mayor. I just wanted to really reiterate the value of the communication between staff and our developers. I feel like that's really important, and this really kind of shows just how much our staff goes to bat for what we want and what you perceive that we want. So I imagine that, that there were some tough conversations. You had to come back and say, here are some major road bumps that we're working with. I will say I do just have concerns about others coming forth, and then maybe we won't see those 60%. So I would like just if we could have some sort of update on what could happen in the future with different contractors coming back and saying, hey, we can't do it for this price anymore. So I just do have concerns about any sort of future projects that we've already approved. So I just want to thank you for that, and thank you for the safety, and soil does matter. Our church had to do it. I mean, the whole entire, they excavated all the soil underneath, and it mainly because it would cause problems with foundations in the future. And it wouldn't be a product that would be of value in the future, I feel. So the fact that you guys took those, safety concerns, I mean, it's mandatory, but I do feel like, that we are moving forward with something that is good. It's not as good as we had hoped. We do have a need in that 60% range for sure, mainly because our AMI is constantly going up too. So, and I will reiterate that it's not all the government's fault that we have inflation. Certainly policies can matter, but really there's a lot of push pull, demand pull, and people who are demanding to work for higher pay too. And I feel like there's nothing wrong with that as well. So thank you for coming tonight, and thank you staff for all of your hard work. Thank you.
Right. And I also want to thank you for being a good partner. The way that we're going to solve this problem, this crisis, is together, and your willingness to work with us and provide something that's below market rate is appreciated too, because we need housing of all different levels. So thank you for being a great partner, and just appreciate the effort you've made. So seeing no further discussion, we'll move forward to the vote on resolution number 2023-103. All in favor? Any opposed? That passes unanimously. Thank you so much. The city and county attorney's report is next. Ms. Rogers, do you have a report?
Just a short one, and I know this was already mentioned earlier, but I just want one more reminder that we have a town hall tomorrow evening on the city and the Broomfield's charter. There's a charter review going on. A post has been made on social media. So for those of you who use social media and are active, please repost, retweet. Let's try to get the word out. We will have another town hall in September. Thank you.
Will do. Thank you so much for that reminder. City and county managers report.
I don't have one. Thanks.
Ms. Yeoman, Mr. Davis, you're good? Okay. And then there is no legislative update or business before the Broomfield Urban Renewal Authority or the Arista Local Improvement District Board of Directors this evening. This evening, we will hear an update on the semi-annual performance and internal audit. Council has a copy of the agenda memorandum, which I'll ask our staff to summarize.
Making his way to the podium is Mr. Bernie Block. Bernie.
Good evening, Mayor, Mayor Pro Tem and council members. Bernie Block, Director of Performance and Internal Audit, here to provide you with an update on the activities that I've been working on since we last met in February of this year. In February, we conducted a risk assessment where we came up with potential audit projects and priority ranked those projects with feedback from the CMO and the city and county attorney. That resulted in the 2023 annual project plan, which is attachment 1 in your packet. Also in your packet is attachment number 2, which is the performance and internal audit status updates listing, which provides a summary of all audit findings, recommendations, and the status of issued audits with open and recently implemented items. Audits that have been worked on since we last met include the Cybersecurity Center for Information Security Assessment and Penetration Testing. We issued those in June of 2023. You haven't seen that because due to the sensitive nature of that, we don't distribute that report because it shows the vulnerabilities that need to be addressed. The Emergency Management Audit, which was issued in July of 2023. The Police Department Property and Evidence Audit is currently in progress, and the grant procedures covering pre-award and post-award activity is also in progress. There have been no special reviews or business improvement projects since we last met. I continue to consult with management on a variety of topics involving internal controls and process improvement related initiatives. I've also participated and assisted with professional development efforts by being a co-facilitator for the Innovator and Innovation Ecosystem trainings, which focus on process improvement and change management. With that being said, I'd like to answer any questions that I could related to the audit projects that I've worked on.
Thank you very much, Mr. Block. We will first start with public comments. If anyone would like to be heard on this item, please step up to the podium. I'm not seeing anyone. So questions from council are next. Does any member of council have any questions? Councilmember Schaaf and then Lim.
Thank you, Mayor. So I do have some questions on the semi-annual performance and internal audit. I'll try to get through these as quickly as I can. One of the pieces that we heard from our financial audit was around the grant procedures. And I'm curious, what does that timeline look for really kind of establishing a great procedure and process for those grant procedures?
Yeah, I can't answer that fully without finances feedback with that, considering the grants position is in that department. I think we're putting together a proposed timeline to see how that fits in with the other priorities that they have. But I can't give you an exact answer, but I could get back to you on that.
Okay, thanks. And this may be a question for the city and county manager's office. There are a lot of these line items that are specific to finance or at least related to finance. You know, how much of this is due to hiring challenges with finance? How quickly can these items be implemented and resolved once that department is fully staffed?
So finance as a department is actually doing pretty well with staffing. It is kind of a shift since, you know, COVID, we saw a lot of transition in many areas. People deciding to stay home or do different things post the pandemic. So we're getting closer on the finance as far as being fully staffed. There's always going to be some transition in a department that large. But as far as the grants position specifically, I know that they're working with HR right now. So we've done a lot with compensation, thanks to council's support. So they're also working through some of those pieces. So when we post these positions, they're fully ready to be executed so we can attract good candidates to those positions. So I think from a staffing perspective, I think we're actually doing pretty well. I think it's just with everything else. Finance is a key piece of what a city and county does, our organization. So it's always, I think, going to be a part of things we look at, especially things that Bernie looks at. I don't know if that answers your question fully, but I feel like we're on the right track and doing well. It's just there's pieces still that we need to finalize and clean up a little bit.
Right. And I appreciate that. I think that, it sounds like both from your response as well as from the memo that we're continuing to work on becoming fully staffed within finance. However, I think that this memo mentioned two positions that haven't been filled yet, the grants administrator within finance, as well as the incentive developer and service expansion fee agreements. Now that's an additional position that's coming on. And it sounds like that this position hasn't been hired and onboarded yet. So, hopefully as these hires come and they're onboarded, that we can start to gain some confidence in the timing and specific deliverables on these agreements, on these grants, processes, and thus, next year when we have the finance audit, we don't hear the same, deficiency come up again. So, hopefully we can clarify that. So I have another question, and it's hopefully not a convoluted question. The ADA audit, it sits in the finance department. Is that just because that's where the best home is? Or is that just because it's the only home that it can have?
That'll actually be moving over to the city and county attorney's office because the risk manager that we're currently hiring for will be in that department.
Okay, so the risk manager moves from finance to the city and county attorney's office, and thus the ADA audit moves as well.
That's correct.
Perfect. Yes. That seems like a better place for it. The police department recruiting and hiring, it seems like that the improvement project is completed. Are there processes that can apply to other departments as well? Or are these processes that really came out of this improvement project, are they really PD specific?
I think the methodology of walking through the steps is, something that could be looked at and used in the departments. But as far as some of the unique steps that the police department needs to go through, you think about the background checks and the psychological evaluations and things of that nature, somewhat unique to the police department. They do have a longer pipeline to get candidates in than most departments, and there's good reasons for that.
Okay, all right. I appreciate that our PD went through that improvement project. It's, I was hoping to get more other departments to benefit from that as well, but it sounds like that it was pretty specific. So we have two major software systems, Boris and CIP asset systems, that are in need of update or purchase. But it sounds like that these purchases are going to be pushed out for at least a couple of years. My assumption, I'm going to make an assumption this time, is due to the financial rationale that, we can't afford those until that point. I'm curious, how much can staff accommodate the current systems while maintaining and providing high customer service to residents, businesses, and employees of Broomfield because of the deficiencies in these systems?
Sorry, Councilmember Chef. So Boris is one of my favorite topics because I've been highly involved with Boris even before coming over to HR. That was my life for about 8 months. So Boris is a stable system. I'm knocking on wood. Boris hears me sometimes and doesn't like to cooperate, but for the most part, truly, like where we were in 2018 when that matrix team was formed is a very different place than where we are now. I know Bernie and I have had conversations since 2018 about there's things that we wish Boris, for example, are. So for those that are listening, this is our human resource information system, where payroll, all of those things are done through there. There's things that we wish it could do and it would be helpful. but they're also enhancement type things where we are stable enough, we're operating okay. The biggest thing that we're looking at right now is our ERP, our system that basically runs our finance system. That is the priority. So we are focusing our energy there because again, those other systems are stable enough that we're not going to get ourselves in a bind. Oracle has hung with us and been a partner, and we've worked through, we've got some other third-party supports for Boris specifically that we feel pretty confident. So the ERP will be our focus for the finance system.
Okay, so in terms of stacking order, the ERP is top priority.
Yes.
And that's why the, Boris enhancements are pushed off, and then the CIP asset system, that of course is pushed off. as
Yeah,
well.
and the only thing I would add is that ERP system is truly the foundation, right? You want everything in an ideal world to work off of that ERP system. And part of what our challenge has been is our finance system is fairly old. Well, not fairly old, it's old. And so we couldn't get it to interconnect with Boris and some of our other systems that we've done. So our approach as the city manager's office with the staff has been, we need to get that foundational system complete first. Then we can figure out what modules and what arms can come off that, including like our HRIS system and other asset management, what can feed into that ERP system. So we really need to get that foundational system figured out first before we do anything else.
Okay, great, thank you. Just a quick note, the travel, training and meals, there was going to be some updates to those procedures around those policies. It would be great for council to also be aware of those, just so that we can be in alignment with staff on those. The last question I have is around the cybersecurity quarterly status. It sounds like that about nearly 25% of the items under not fully implemented safeguard lists are high priorities. What is the timeline to complete those high priorities within that list?
I know that information, Councilmember Schaaf, information technology is currently looking at that and creating a game plan. Part of it's resources needed to address it. Some of these are tools. They have partially implemented different controls, but based on this particular ranking system that we're using, you only get a certain amount of credit. So it's not as if we're not doing anything. But at the end of the day, I think they need more tools to be able to manage some of these items.
Okay, I guess I would hope that, at our next quarterly status, that we kind of have at least a roadmap for how we're going to take care of those high priorities. I understand that resources is a part of that picture, but just as the Boris system and the ERP system and that CIP asset management system, there's a stacking order. And it seems to me that with the cybersecurity list, that the stacking order has already been created with the high priority, medium priority, and low priority.
We're working on some reporting that'll not only show what was revealed in this audit, but also all the new threats that are coming online, which are continuous. So, they're constantly addressing items, right? And so we'll try to get a kind of a rolling inventory of where we're at to provide a clearer picture with that.
Great.
Councilmember Schaaf, I would just add that we just met with the consultants. When was that? In June? Boy, it was in June already. So Kateri and Bernie and myself and the team are looking at basically what those results, and the consultant actually had recommendations for how and what you tackle first. To your point, they prioritize that. I actually like your suggestion of that roadmap. So we'll talk to Kateri, but I know Bernie's continued those conversations since June with the IT team to make sure that we're moving forward on those pieces.
Great, thank you. And I'm over time, so I'm done for now. Thank you.
You can have more time. Okay. Anybody else? Thank you, Councilmember Lim. I did have you on first.
Yeah. I focused on the emergency management performance audit that we received in July. I was reading the CMO update, and in case residents didn't know, we now have an emergency page, and we have some communication going out to the residents to make sure that they know that that emergency page is available in case of unpredictable weather. So as I was reading this announcement, the weather in Colorado can be unpredictable. Be prepared. Don't wait for a crisis to strike. And then I was thinking about the high priority items that are, you know, kind of left in this emergency management performance audit in July that are undone that are not completed from a city perspective. So I read the summary. I realized there was a lot of transition in the department. There was a lot of file consolidation and management that had to be done. But there were at least 2 high priority items that seemed that needed to be addressed fairly quickly. And that was just having a 5-year plan that doesn't exist on a regular, you know, isn't regularly updated as a standard procedure at the moment. So do you see these high priority, and there were medium priority items too that needed to be addressed in emergency management? Do you see that we have the resources to move quickly on this? Because like I said, obviously we have many reasons, wildfires, floods, whatever, that we need to be concerned that we're ready for anything.
Thank you for your question, Councilmember Lim. I believe that the emergency management function has, it's recently been restructured and has been allocated additional resources. And I do think we're heading down the right path. I know they have a project plan put together that hopefully will address a lot of these items in prior to the end of the year. I haven't seen the specifics on it, but I know they're chipping away at it. And I think we're in a better place with this function than we've been in my time here. And so it's maturing overall.
Is this something that you as an auditor will follow up on, or is this just out of your hands at this point that they're headed in the right direction? Or will you go back and say, did you address this high priority items?
The direction I've always received from the city manager's office is trust but verify. So that's the attachment 2 in your package there. It's follow-up activities on all these audits, and that will be included in that as well.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Councilmember Lim, I would just add, like, Bernie doesn't do this in isolation. Like, when he gets these findings, we review the summaries and everything and have conversations with Bernie. So as deputies that oversee these different departments, Dawn specifically has Parks and Recreation, Emergency Management. There's follow-up from the deputies as well to verify that those steps are being taken. I will say, just in the last couple of years of having been here a little bit with emergency management, this is the most, they're making headway. They're working really efficiently. It doesn't necessarily feel like it all the time because they've had to do a lot of things like the hazard mitigation plan, different things like that. But they also have a team where before we had an emergency manager and there was a lot of weight on that person's shoulders. Now we have an emergency manager and 2 staff. So we've dedicated more resources, to your point, to make sure that we're moving as effectively and efficiently as we can. I don't know if Dawn wants to add anything.
Yes, ma'am. So emergency management falls underneath me. I've got a background at NORAD, Northcom. I assure you, I've read the report. I have every confidence that Clay and the team are moving in the right direction. While we also still do exercises, it's important for us to do wildfire exercises and command and control exercises and so forth. Internet attack or cyberspace attack we've done since I've been here. I know we've done at least two major exercises, which are, I can assure you, even more important. We're working on that 5-year plan. They're working on the there's a lot of different, you want to get it approved by other levels outside of the organization as well, like at the state and the national level. In order to get the, when you're working with FEMA and things like that, they want to know that those plans are in place. So it's got my attention for sure, just because of my background. But I am very confident in that department, the way it's staffed now. And I think it's only been a year since it was designated, as the emergency management underneath Mr. Shuck, and he's got a really good handle on it. So I'm very confident. And that it's near and dear to my heart. So I'll tell you that I'll be keeping a close eye on it.
Okay, thank you. And there was one thing in the report that I did want to applaud the staff on is there was a note that when there was a recognition that there were no backups, that there was a survey sent out that to ask for people who had felt that they could step up in the backup roles and had skills perhaps in the certain areas to contribute in that emergency situation. So that was certainly a credit to staff who stepped forward to say, yes, I can back up in an emergency. So I wanted to acknowledge that. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Any other questions from council? Well, I don't have any, so thank you so much, Mr. Black. This is very intense and comprehensive work, and we appreciate your update.
Thank you.
All right, well, there are no requests for future action this evening, concluding the items on the agenda. Is there any other business to come before council? There being no